this is the show. This is the Redacted Culture Cast. So, Brent, welcome to the Redacted Culture Cast. We were having an exciting pre-show chat, which where we were talking about gun culture, community building, and issues with becoming jaded after time invested, as well as sort of this purveying, never-ending problem that the gun culture, as well as other communities, as you were mentioning earlier, would be like the car community or whatever, has to deal with is, since there's no hierarchy that's official, how do you know where you stack up? And then who are the haves and the have-nots and all these other kind of silly questions. But instead of going, or not even instead of that, would you introduce yourself?
Hey, thanks for having me on. My name is Brent Michael Brabant. I live out of the Pacific Northwest now, out of a little town called Rainier. No street lights, one stop sign, 2 gas stations, just far enough away from Seattle that, it's like a 45-minute drive. I did a decade in the United States Army as an infantryman, and ended up teaching near the end of my tenure there, and that's where I fell in love with instructing people how to use guns and gears properly.
Gotcha. And so where do you interact most with the gun culture as a whole? Is there a certain social media platform that you use the most?
Yeah, just Instagram and Facebook. I have my personal page and then my company page that's where people can sign up for classes and stuff like that. 11 Bravo LLC.
Okay. Yep. I'm gonna put it in the. I will put it in the description below for people to find out. But just read those off so anyone who's listening along knows where to find you.
Yeah. So just Instagram 11 Bravo LLC. Go ahead and hit me up on there if you want to schedule a private class or a group class.
Alrighty. Cool. So we were talking about something that you had done in the past, and that was that you had been putting on these community events. And so not only do I think that you were ahead of the zeitgeist a bit there, but it's a good example to bring up to the community as a whole.
Yeah, so I was very lucky at around 2017, about a year before I was getting out. We started putting on little classes, and originally it started just being former military and current military trying to train more than we actually did, and sharing the knowledge that we were learning from these new firearms classes. But then it was to bring the veterans who had recently got out into the fold so that they still had some sense of community. And how it grew from there is, there's always a veteran or a current military person who's like, hey, can I bring my friend? He enjoys shooting. And then we're like, okay, yeah, bring one. And then it turned into like, hey, I got a buddy that's a law enforcement officer. Can he come out? You guys are doing cool stuff. And then next thing we know, it turned into like this 60-man class on a topic, right? Whether it be pistol, rifle, foreign weapons, barriers, vehicles. We started bringing everything we could out so that people would be exposed to it and do stuff that they necessarily couldn't do at their local flat range.
Awesome. That's like, so 60 people is a pretty big community event, especially if how was this all being run? Was this all like paid attendance only, or how were you making it?
No, it was free. I always asked for donations, which people could donate or not. It was up to them. But basically, once it got to 60, that's where I had to start capping it, because I didn't have enough assistant instructors or safeties, and I wanted it to be where everyone could come. So like if you sign up for 2 classes in a row, I would actually put your name on the side. So, it's cool that you're coming, but I also wanted to make sure newer people could attend. So we would always make sure at least 10 new students for every class could attend. And, some of the dudes were pretty cool about it. They're like, hey, I want to sign up, but I know I've been to 2 in a row. If no one signs up, make sure I get that spot. And I mean, literally within 2 minutes of me posting like signups, I would have to go through the DMs and pick by timestamps the first 60. That's how quickly it would fill up. And it was really cool. It was just, we did it for years. The only reason why we stopped is I was selling my house and moving. Obviously with the interest rates skyrocketing, I didn't get to sell the house. I still live in it. But it turned into this cool thing. I sent you a video, and like we tried to make it about the community. And obviously sometimes your face gets involved, right? Because people want to focus on one individual that does it. We tried to make it a group thing, but as you know, sometimes people don't pull their weight, or sometimes people aren't as invested in it as you are.
Yep.
And that was something me and you were talking about earlier. It's like you really have to try to think of it as a this is the tribe, right? And you're trying to build that tribe. And a lot of people told me you don't realize until you get older that to build a community, it's very hard. And I never understood what that meant until I tried doing it.
Yeah, it's there's when people say things like blood, sweat, and tears, they're oftentimes quite literal, and we
Yeah.
often and what we always see, like anything of this type, is we only always ever see the aftermath or what came of the work, but that time is things like sitting at your desk and trying to write out who's going to be there, how are you going to get them there, and how are you going to fund it, and how are you going to make it happen, and it's not easy, right? You got to find a range, you got to find a space, you got to find it, and people they don't all, not if they're not paying for it, you got to afford it, and
Yeah, coming from the Army, and like luckily being a platoon sergeant at one point, understanding the logistics behind everything was the backwards planning of like, okay, this is what we want to teach. Okay, if we're going to teach this, this is how many people we can have on the range. This is how many pieces of steel I need. This is how many pieces of paper. This is what we're going to cover. It should take between this time to this time. And I mean, it even got to where like I would provide lunches. So like when people donated, like because I'd ask for donations at the end, that money would go towards repairing steel, and then the next group's lunch.
Mhm.
So we buy pizzas or sandwiches or just stuff like that, just so people could get that right. Like the bonding happens sometimes on the range, but on the range you're focusing on the drill or what you have to do. But that hour break when you have lunch and you get to sit and talk with people, that's when that community actually starts to form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so. And it's the before and after, and it's the like everyone gets to the range. They start figuring out who each other is, and we all do it. Like there are ways to do it wrongly for sure, but we all kind of figure out who we are, and then there's that bonding time where people actually start connecting with one another, and that's really what I think. That's what we're so much of gun culture is after right now. And when I say I think that is, it's because we can all see it. Like we're just getting out of the house.
Yeah, and that's the big thing is I try to challenge everybody. It's like, look, if you're going shooting, take somebody with you. Take somebody that you haven't took with you. It's so easy to sit back and say that this is the problem, but like, what are you doing about the problem to make it better, right? If you don't enjoy the gun community, what are you doing to make it better?
So
that's where we form those cliques. Go ahead.
There's a difference between the community, growing the community, the gun culture, and your community. And
Yeah,
I think it's Southpaw Luke has talked about that quite a bit. He said there is the difference between, well, he talks a lot about the microcosm, like your community, the people that you know, that you spend your time with. And
what I liked about my classes is if you take a group picture, they're not all white guys, ex-military with tattoos. Because it's yeah, exactly, right. But it's very easy to fall into that trap because you see these people and you're like, oh, I'll invite them. They have XYZ background. It's not going to be too hard to teach them. But the one thing I tried to focus on was bringing people that necessarily didn't fit into the norm of gun culture. And what I mean by that is like, there's some people that just, I would say they're a little strange, but I would be like, hey, you can come to the class. This is what you need to bring, blah, blah, blah. And they were just a little off, but we had everything from, with stay-at-home moms with crazy pink hair that come out to a vehicle class. And it's like, people are like, well, she's never shot in a vehicle. I'm like, exactly. This is the best time. I'd rather her learn now on the range than it in real life. And the biggest thing is to get that across to everybody else is like, look, new guns are going to look weird. New shooters will look even weirder.
That's a good point. Now I think, how can you narrow down what the objective is though? Like this is a military term. What is the objective?
Yeah, your TLOs, right? Your terminal learning objective. So say it's a basic vehicle class, right? What we were doing is allowing them to shoot through windshields for the first time to see not only bullet deviation, but get experience from you putting around through a piece of glass, what's going to happen to the glass, what's going to happen to your pistol or rifle, and you exiting the vehicle to put more mass in between you and the target. So it's a simple drill, right? Something happens, you can't drive through whatever the, if you want to say it's an ambush or whatever, like this is the civilian world. So people could show up and train on whatever they wanted. If they want to wear full kit, carry a rifle, that's fine for the vehicle class. If they just wanted to use their concealed carry, that's fine. Their main objective is to be able to put rounds through a windshield, hit a target, egress the vehicle safely, get between the vehicle and the persons, and still fire rounds safely, and figure out how to use these, pillars to put damage on target and not expose yourself.
Yeah, for sure.
And we would put people in the same vehicle together, so it's like driver passenger, right? And one person might be a LEO guy who's done, is a SWAT guy. And then on the other hand, we have that stay-at-home mom with a concealed carry pistol inside her Michael Kors purse. And I'm like, figure it out. You guys get your reps in, right? There's safeties there, making sure you hit your target, making sure you're not shooting the vehicle, stuff like that. But it's just exposing them to the ability to shoot behind windshields. And we were very lucky to, pay a guy who had a Jeep that his windshield was cracked. So I was like, cool, we're going to shoot through that. We had another vehicle, same thing. So I paid for new windshields so that we could shoot through all theirs.
There you go.
And that was just one of the examples of the classes is like, all right, we got 60 different types of people, but we want them to all shoot through the windshield, hit targets, egress the vehicle, get rounds on it, and learn how to use their cover. And, it starts from showing up, introducing everybody. Everybody introduces themselves. You lock and clear all weapons. You get through your dry fires, making sure everyone can communicate. And then it's like right before lunchtime, all right, we're going hot. And then you just start cycling people through.
So at some point in time, did you start getting people asking you how you even got this off the ground? Like
and people who wanted to do something similar, but like more up north, so it's closer to them, right? They're not driving 3 hours. And I was like, yeah, man. I was like, I will give you all of the classroom stuff I have from my military days so you can follow some sort of doctrine. And I was like, I even let people borrow steel targets. I'm like, look, if you you're putting a class on next week, when we leave this class, take whatever steel you want, just bring it back. I wanted them to succeed as much as possible, but then it gets to where they start dropping stuff off that's broken with no means of wanting to fix it. They start losing stuff. They're like, oh, we lost this base. I'm like, oh, that's cool, but that's $200.
Yeah, it's not coming out of nowhere. Like it's not free. You know what I mean?
And it was the unappreciation of like, oh yeah, man, we lost that. And I'm like, okay. And then that was the end of the conversation. I was like, come on, guys. Like,
so we're going to get back to that. We're going to get back to that premise or that the concept there, or not the concept. We're going to get back to that topic, but there's a specific question that I'm trying to formulate better to ask you. And that is, another way of saying it is, if you were to looking back at how long you've been doing this since 2017, and you were going to say, okay, so this is when it went from like an idea to a reality, as well as if you were going to try to put that whole system into a package, right? You got a bunch of dudes who meet in Kansas, and there's 8 of them or whatever. And they're like, man, we've never shot out of a car before. And for so many years, the attitude of gun culture is that would be cool. I'll never be able to do it. And I don't like that attitude. I'm tired of hearing it. It's like, well,
or people think you need to do like XYZ to earn the right to do it, right? Like, oh, you want to shoot out of a car? Well, you haven't even done like a level 1 or a level 2 class. And it's like, look, man, you might go into the grocery store tomorrow and have to shoot out of your car. Like,
yeah, well, it's that like there is that side to it, but the other side is actually purely the logistical side. So let's use this. We'll use this as a metaphor. Like we'll use this as the framework, right? So how do you find a range? How would you recommend people work with ranges to be able to put on stuff like this? Because depending on where you're at in the country, there's a lot of one of the let's just call it gatekeeping issues, or one of the barriers to entry is definitely land and range, because but it can be overcome. Another one, I mean, Washington is not the most, what do you call it? It's not Washington state is not like, it's not like Arizona or Texas. Okay. You don't just have people out shooting in the desert. Right. And so you have some challenges there. Another one would be, and so there's kind of a couple of classic examples: shooting out of a car, CQB, long distance precision shooting. Big three, let's just call it, urban sniper, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
And like those are three really good examples where for people to get out and do it, one of the hurdles that I think they're facing is how do you, where do you get a vehicle? How do you put this stuff together? And on the one hand, I wanted you to talk about it because I think you have you show a good success story, and that's a great place to be. The other hand, reason why I want to talk about it is so that we can kind of eliminate the people who use logistics as an excuse, but were never willing to participate to begin with. That's
Yep.
kind of what.
So the easiest thing to do is always crowdsource, right? You get you and your buddies together, you come up with your own, whatever sets you guys up in your environment to do a think tank, right? Sometimes it's a bar environment, sometimes it's at somebody's house grilling. You set the stage for free flow of ideas where nobody is ostracized for their ideas. And that's how you start it, right? So it's me and you, and we're like, okay, first thing is we want to do a vehicle class. Okay. So we need land and we need to source the vehicle. Luckily, out here in the Pacific Northwest, you can shoot in any natural rock quarry. But if you don't and you have a range, it's as easy as going to that range and saying, hey, if we were to provide a vehicle, towing it in, towing it out, and clean up of said glass, would we be able to host a class in here on a vehicle? And I've done that. I've gone to ranges and they're like, look, if you can tow the vehicle in and tow the vehicle out and make sure that the range itself doesn't get damaged and you clean up after yourself, you're good to go. And then now it comes down to the vehicle, right? You would be shocked how many people have a vehicle they don't give two shits about.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And even if you're not going to shoot through the windshield, right? Say somebody has a beater truck and you're like, hey, look, we're going to roll all the windows down. We're not going to shoot through the windshield. Can we borrow this truck? Maybe somebody might skip around through the hood into the, distributor cap, but, or blow out a tire. Is that okay? Yeah, man. Like, you'd be shocked how many people, if they are allowed to come and participate and you're taking pictures or videos, would throw their vehicle out there. Again, I've had people in the community after I did the first 2 vehicle classes offer me like, hey, I have this piece of shit car. I know it'll make it to where we shoot. Can we shoot around it, do that? I don't care if rounds end up in it. And then, I'll drive it out. And I'm like, cool.
Mm-hmm. Good. So I think that's exactly where we're at too. And I'm glad that you're able to address it so specifically, and like, just go talk to people, get your people together, start with your group, and then and just pick a goal and figure it out. I think that doesn't sound very poetic or anything, but it is a very military approach, to be clear.
Yeah, and that's what I did as a PSG. It was like, look, I don't have all the answers, right? But if I bring everyone together and everyone feels like they're contributing or their say has weight, now whatever the plan is, even if it's not a perfect plan, everyone contributed to it, so they feel more inclined to put more effort into that plan.
For sure. Yeah. No, that does make sense. So what other kinds of classes did you guys put out? We've talked quite a bit about a vehicle-based class, but what are some of the other examples that are, let's just call them non-standard? So like not pistol 1, rifle 1, whatever.
Yeah. So we did a foreign weapons class, which I thought was kind of funny. So basically I brought all these weird style, like, whether it be G3s, AKs, I got some World War II guns, everything from MagFed, stripper clips, things that are just different, right? Not ARs. And we would set up a course of fire where you had to use the different weapon systems. Like, you would run to a barrier, pull whatever this gun was out of a bag, right? So you didn't know what was going to be in the bag. Mm-hmm. Load it, put it in operations, poke out behind your cover, shoot that piece of steel, set the gun down, run to the next barrier, grab the new gun. And then it ended up with like, I think we had like either a Dragunov or an RPK at the very end to make a 100-meter shot. So then they would sprint all the way to that, load that weapon system, put it into action, prone out, extend the bipods, and then have to take like a precision shot. And the idea was just, hey, look, manual of arms, we had like an SKS at one, so you had to like take a stripper clip and load it. And it was just trying to expose somebody to something different and not where you just hand them a loaded gun and they just bump fire into one piece of steel standing still, right? It was to make it the simulated battle of like, battlefield pickup, whatever you want to call it, where you're moving between these barriers. You have to use whatever weapon system is there, know how to put it in operation, know how to aim with all the different style of iron sights there were, fire, and then as soon as it's done, move to the next one. And
Now,
people loved it way more than I thought they would.
yeah, no, you because like I want to do this now. I want to do
Yeah,
one of
it
these.
sounds and then when you really talk about it, it's super rudimentary, right? Like
Mhm,
like I have a World War II PPS 43, right? Just an
mhm,
old school submachine gun, but you set that thing down, or like we would take it apart. And obviously before the class, we teach everybody how to like assemble stuff. But it's the idea of them like being on a shot clock, which the time doesn't matter, but hitting the buzzer and they run up and they have to pull this stuff out of a bag and assemble it and then
mhm.
put a mag in, charge it, and then shoot a couple pieces of steel and then move on to the next barrier and another weapon. People really enjoyed it.
I can no, I can see why though too. There's two sides to it. One of them is I don't think everything has to be realistic. There's a certain
Yeah,
part of me that understands that when we're going to the courses and we're doing training, like we it needs to have a correlation to reality. But it's kind of like I was listening to what was it like? I think it was one of the GBRS guys talking about how in the shoot house, what you got to realize that you're not playing paintball. And the place where they see that happen a lot is people start thinking door frames are invincible. Like, dude, bullets go through this kind of stuff, so you can't sit here and do this head bobbing thing. And
yep. You said that as I was like doing it on camera, like
exactly,
I
right?
knew what
Like
you're talking about.
the it's like that chicken head video. The guy like you did, yeah. That's
Yeah.
not how because you pop your head out, you put your head back in, and bam, you're just gonna get shot. You're gonna get smoked in the chest because the dude's just gonna be like bang. Wall bangs happen.
Jump around through that floor.
Yeah, so like not everything has to be realistic. Not everything has to be every single thing that you do on the range does not have to be a one-to-one correlation with reality. And this is one of the challenges that even IDPA has dealt with is like they need to give you some scenario. Like the scenario is hit the targets faster than everybody else, but we're going to make it sound like none of that matters. The other thing about it though is for what you're doing on this course, this foreign weapons course that I find so interesting is like it's literally the Call of Duty thing. I want to try all of them out. I want to try
Yep.
them all out to see what they're like, to see what it like to just sort of learn. Sometimes I just want that feeling of novelty of like I've never shot one
So
of
we
these.
learned that everybody wants to shoot, guns, but we didn't want people to just hand you a loaded gun and you just stand there and like it. We see it at every range, and the guy just mag dumps into the same target, right?
Mhm.
And we were like, how do we get somebody to shoot a new gun without them just standing still and shooting at a piece of steel or a piece of paper?
Yeah.
And we were like, okay, let's set it up behind a barrier. And then we were like, okay, let's teach them how the guns work, but don't let them shoot it yet. So the first time they shoot it is live,
Yeah,
right?
and you've got your safeties in place. You've
Yeah,
done
yeah.
all the
But
you've done all this is all due diligence is assumed.
yeah, yeah. There is a single individual standing at each station that I'm very lucky that I still have friends in the special operations community out of JBLM. So like you have a, sergeant first class, active duty Green Beret guy watching you so you can't accidentally shoot yourself with these weird weapons. And,
Mhm,
to most people, these weapons are very common,
mhm.
Soviet issued stuff, old, G3 style, but to somebody who has only shot an AR or a Glock style pistol, they're different. And that's another thing. We throw in like double action pistols and watch people just lose their minds. Like
Mhm.
even the art of just shooting a standard Beretta or a Sig 226 is lost now.
Yeah, so this is also recent memory too. I I've got when I got out of the military, I bought a Smith and Wesson M&P, right? And so this was like 2013, and it was like a VTAC edition, and I used that for a while until I picked up something else for competition. It's pretty much retired. Like the platform is tired. That gun is very tired. It's seen the worst end of my proclivities. But the other thing though is like, and then next to it right now on the shelf, I've got a Sig P320 that's got like a barrel comp on it and a red dot and a magwell, and it's just this big 320, and it's like innovation comes in degrees. It very rarely leaps and bounds. It's always gradually then suddenly, and so looking at these two things side by side, but I also remember the first time I shot a double single action. And I remember I was in the military when I had a Beretta M9. And then the first time I shot a Glock was a very different experience for me, because I was expecting that 12-pound trigger pull. And if you want to call that a negligent discharge, I guess that's what it was. It was downrange. Like, sights, I was pointing downrange, but as I'm like presenting the pistol to expecting to pull up all that take up, the round goes bang, and I'm like, I no one saw, so no one, I didn't get in trouble, but it was like, oh, this is a Glock, I don't have to do that anymore. And then it's a learning experience, and I think that's an extremely valuable thing. Now what I want to see what your take on is, how could you recreate that in different communities? Because, and then the other part, not different communities, but like in different areas. But then the other question is, did you end up going to like a special weapons course ever?
Yeah, so I got super lucky to go over to group and take a lot of courses. I ran the advanced marksmanship instructor course for JBLM. So it was a 3-week course that had SRM, LRM, and CQB that we would teach to infantry to further the progression. While I was there, I got accepted to go through the Special Forces Advanced Urban Combat and take what they were doing for SF and try to bring it into the infantry to have a higher level of teaching and learning. And then through that, I got to go through their low-vis operator course and some of their foreign weapons stuff. So it allowed me to learn more. And due to that, I wanted people to have these learning experiences, right? Like, I didn't want to stand there and be like, oh, I have all these cool schools. I'm like, all right, guys, I fucked up so bad doing this. I'm going to make sure if you ever have to touch this, you don't do the same thing I did.
Yeah. It's just that it is the joy of sharing information. So, clarification of terms: SRM, LRM. What are those?
Short range marksmanship and long range marksmanship. So basically, we would teach rifle and pistol at 25 meters and in. It was a system called CPAC back in the Army, Combat Pistol Application. Basically, the Army didn't have a lot of pistol shooting schools. So they created CPAC, and that was part of that. So we would teach people actually how to use their pistol, when to use their pistol, room clearing with just pistol for MPs and stuff like that. And then for, because we already knew it was coming down that team leader and up, we're going to start getting SIGs and stuff like that. Trying to get this information down to the line of, this is how you're going to carry a pistol. This is what conditions you need to carry it in. This is when you would transition. And they would do room clearing with the rifles, and then we would set them up for failure. So when the rifle would go cold, they would still have to go to their points of domination or continue to clear with their pistol until they got to a strong point and then could transition back.
Yeah, I think one thing that gets taken for granted is how far we've come with handguns, especially with holsters and technology. Because I remember going on deployments where we brought M9s with us, but I did not carry that on a mission. Why would I? It was old, it was worn out, my holster was trash. I had one more thing.
Very lucky to have a pistol very early in my career, getting put in the scout section and then in the sniper section. So I had an M24, which is a bolt action 5-round gun. And then they give you a Beretta and you're like, okay. And you just put it in a magazine pouch.
Yep.
And then slowly, you get like a Serpa holster, which, now in retrospect, that was horrific. But
yeah, they had a short lifespan.
Yeah. But then we started learning, and that's what got me into pistol competition. Was I got issued a pistol, before I was even a sergeant, and I was like, I should learn how to use this. So I went down to Cabela's and I bought a Beretta M92 SOCOM edition, meaning it was just green and it had a pick rail.
There you go.
And that's what I used to train on, and that thing is horrific.
Well, like I said, it's like, in order to appreciate what you have, sometimes you have to see where we've come from. And
So I've been super lucky. When I got out, I shot at All Army twice, 2 years in a row, and the colonel decommissioned my service Beretta and gave it to me. And then I kind of tricked it out with like Resident Evil style shit. But I keep a standard Beretta around, and I take it to the range every few months to remember, like, this is where I came from. Yep. And then I have a technologically advanced Beretta with a red dot and compensator and all that jazz. Just to know that, hey, look, you can take an old gun and make it modern.
You certainly can. Like, it's not all bad. I remember seeing, some of the Wonder Nines and the 1980s era and early 90s eras handguns before anything else came out, and like, man, there's a reason why the CZ75 caught so much attention for so long, because that was a marked advancement from what you had to
The
do.
technological advancement too, like, and it sparked a legacy where if people shoot those, they normally shoot those for life.
Oh, for
Like
sure.
that's what they preach. Like, and I think that's what we're getting into in the gun culture now with the explosion of SIG's 320 program, the ability to configure it to whatever you need to. Now we're having this rift between SIG and Glock people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the SIG and Glock thing, though, you're still talking about kissing cousins. I mean, they're really, 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 really close. And I have most of us. This is something that I find really funny, though. It's like most of us really end up having both. Like most of us will have one of each.
Being a teacher, I have tons. I highly suggest the 320s, just due to the fact that you can configure it all the way from a concealed carry gun to a competition gun just by swapping the fire control unit and adding grip. It's relatively cheaper than most Glocks now, like for tricking out wise. And the fact that the only thing serialized is the fire control unit or trigger, it just makes it so much easier to get parts and stuff for.
Yeah, and then you've got things like the Flux Defense Radar. Like I think the idea, the innovation, if you want to call it, of the fire control group should not be overlooked. Does it have some? Does it have some ironing out to do? Oh, I'm sure it'll always go. But I've had a P320 for a couple of years now, and the thing that I actually really liked about it, that pushed, I was using a Glock 19 with an RMR on it, and I switched from that to the SIG, is just because of the grip angle and the way that it presents the optic. It's just so much more natural for me.
So that was something I was very lucky enough to have a red dot on a Glock back in 2015, and playing with it. And being in the Army program, we got the M17s first, and they were all tan. They had the safeties, but we knew that we could remove the plate and put a delta point on it, and we did that. And due to that grip angle is why the majority of us signed, which one would you do, and we had to do a write-up. And due to the fact that it had a safety, obviously we wanted it to have a safety due to newer shooters. I do think newer shooters kind of need a gun with a safety, especially in the Army, as things get tripped constantly. We actually signed off on, yes, the M17 by and large is easier to maintain, easier to clean, and cheaper to replace parts than a Glock.
Interesting. Yes, I didn't have any essay on the back end of that system, but that would make sense, given the reality of it too. Is I still keep a Glock 9. Like, anytime someone's getting new into shooting, first recommendation is like, first handgun, what should I buy? Glock 19.
Yep, 100%.
Why should every person own a Glock 19? Because they're $500 and you're never going to get rid of it. It doesn't mean
they're simple.
There's no other thing for it. That's my point, is that you get one and you never get rid of it. My first handgun was an H&K USP 45 compact. I sold it because I never shot it. I never used it. And it was like, why?
The Metal Gear Solid in you wanted a Mark 23.
It was the Sam Fisher. It was a Splinter Cell. I was thinking, but I mean, was it a nice handgun? Absolutely. But the reality is, I still have my Glock 19, and I'm going to continue to have that until eternity, basically. Like, that's the goal. And so, but the reason why too is it's just such a good platform, and then you push off from there, or you can do it with a 320, and you can make some adjustments from there.
We have seen, luckily, I'm in a state that recently passed some very bad gun laws. So we had a lot of new shooters coming into this world because they wanted to buy before they can't. And again, people's average income in here is a lot higher than most places. So we were having people that were just buying STIs for their first guns.
Yep.
All these 2011 style platforms that cost, $2,500 and up. And they're like, okay, now what do I do? And I'm like, that's your first gun? You were like, I'm gonna spend $3,000 on my first pistol. I'm like, okay, like, here we go. Like,
no, it's good though. Like, more power to you. Definitely. If that's the way that you're going and that's within you're good, like, that more power to you, dude. I'm happy for it. you're probably going to buy a second one, just to say,
Yeah.
like just to kind of get around to it. All right, so let's change gears a little bit here. I want to hear a little bit about what you learned from the foreign weapons course, but there's this other thing that I want to hear from you specifically. Now, the audience knows that I'm a military guy, you're a military guy, and gun culture is definitely moving away from this sort of exclusivity of the military. And a lot of that is actually coming from veterans themselves. Though we're coming out, we're basically leaving the military world with a bunch of dudes and people who are just people, and we're like, there's no difference in rights and responsibilities inside and outside of that position, at least for the average American. And so for you, and one thing that though I think there's a term that we talked about with, it was Jared Arsenault of Orion Training Group, which is this term of tactical Gnosticism. It's this idea that, let's just talk about CQB as the easy example, as if it's some sort of secret course thing that you could learn in the military. And not only did that turn out not to be true, but the reality that I encountered in the military, and I had a very narrow experience only in Ranger Battalion, is you didn't really learn CQB in a course. You learned it because you just did it all the time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, 100%. So we'll start from the beginning. So I got lucky enough to do a what I would say a ghetto mobile training team of the foreign weapons course was. I didn't get to go to Bragg and do the full one, which kind of sucks. But basically, they laid out all the guns and we went over how to operate them, how to take care of them, how to maintain them. And I was always that guy in Iraq and Afghanistan that anytime we captured weapons, I would take them apart and clean them. And I had a little book of serial numbers because I wanted to keep track of the different styles of Kalashnikovs that we were getting, like where they were originally manufactured. In Iraq, they all came from the same two places, but in Afghanistan, oh my God, we would find really cool stuff like Chinese stuff, African made stuff. And then playing with the PKMs was always fun. And then fixing Dishkas until eventually all the Dishkas would break and we couldn't get foreign parts. So we just started giving them old 50 cals that we had that would still require headspace and timing now that we switched to the new one. So I was always a big fan of foreign weapons and learning how to use them. And in Afghanistan, we ran into them a lot. We ran into a PPS 41, and first sergeant was like, "Hey, you're a gun nerd. How do you take this apart?" And I was like, "Oh, pulling the drum mag, pushing the feed ramp up, pushing everything out." And he's like, "How do you know how to do that?" I'm like, "Look, man, we're coming to Afghanistan. I should know all Soviet-based weaponry."
So I think of it, that is certainly in the military a specialty. Like it being well versed in various different firearms really is a specialty, and I think this is where something that doesn't get translated very well out to the rest of the world is that your average soldier, your average ranger, is a guy they're very capable at warfare, but all of the little particulars, they're going to have some specialty, and they're going to have and some of that is going to be directed by their unit. For example,
yeah, we become nerd.
Yeah, but
you become a nerd in your field.
Well, some do. But here's a good example. I've always been fairly academically inclined. And so when I got to Ranger Battalion, very quickly they sent me to a language school. And so I learned Pashtun. Now, was it useful? Yeah. In the long run, yeah. In the long run, yes. But
you're running around like, Desha Kudus Tuman, Tanesti,
yeah. It's could I one of the things that I did the most is I'd try to figure out where their bread was. I was like, dude, where do you find where's your bakery? I want some
mom.
And silly questions like that. But because I continued on after my military service to go to Afghanistan some more. And so this whole special weapons thing, you think, oh, everyone who's a ranger knows everything about guns. Dude, no. The first AK-47 that I shot got a round lodged in the barrel. It was like clack, 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 yank, yeet, because it was old. But yeah, we were trying to figure out how to make sure all the minions, all the privates, all of us were more educated on the types of firearms that were being used. But I didn't know what a PPSH was.
So I think comes down to like people always try to specialize in something, right? Like some dudes are really good into fitness.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some dudes do the PowerPoint stuff. I was always like a gun nerd, right? Like we grew up in the same era, so like playing video games and all this other shit. You deep dive into that, and then when you get into the Army, you have access to manuals. Not that people fucking read them, but you have access to all these manuals, and believe it or not, there's manuals on everything from the Army, from our Army, on other people's armies, guns and gear, and how to maintain them, how to take them apart. You know, level 1, level 2, level 3 maintenance. And to me, it was fascinating that people didn't want to learn that, because to me, I'm like, I think it's cool to learn stuff, that to be the SME in one thing, right? So like, I'm sure you guys had access to all these crazy thermals and stuff like that, but most people don't know how to fucking use them or mount them or zero them.
We did not. I did not have access to a bunch of crazy thermals, actually. So I mean, we had a few of them. We had a few little handhelds, but I did not see the proliferation of thermal technology in my
So
time.
in the regular Army, in your armory, because I found out it was MTOD, so like it has to be in the armory, right? Like there needs to be X amount of night vision per people, X amount of ARs, X amount of M4s. We found out that
just remember, I did my first deployment with a PVS-14. Like I did not.
yeah.
So I'm not saying that I'm old, because there's definitely dudes like a squad leader of mine was telling a story about when he was in, I think, the 82nd, before he came to Ranger Battalion. He was clearing the basement of a building with an L-bend flashlight and an M16. Like, and this isn't so like this is and so sure.
Well, we joined the same era, 2008.
Yep, same time frame.
Yeah,
yep.
yeah, so, same thing, right? Iraq with 14s, but what I mean is like we found out infantry companies were MTO'd this PAS 13 Bravo Charlie. There's like so many variants.
Yep.
But it's all these thermals that I was like, okay, cool. Where are they? And they're like, oh, they're over here. And I was like, all right, why are we not using them? And they're like, well, nobody knows how. And I'm like, check it out. There's this little book that comes with it. It's called a manual.
Yep.
And if you just take your time to read it, experiment with it, play around with it, take it to the range. So then we started having dedicated, like our spare M16s. We'd throw a PAS 13 on it and give it to whoever's on guard. So it's like, all right, hey, we zeroed it. It'll be the rotational duty for night for a guard. So he has the ability to scan with thermals, right?
Yep.
And it's implementing everything we found in the arms room, that like there's stuff that would just be given to the arms room that nobody would have a class on. So we took it upon ourselves to learn it. We found these goggles that used to plug into the thermal. So we would mount the thermal on a machine gun, and now the AG can literally put on these goggles and see what the machine gunner sees and direct targetry. Nice. Yeah. And this is 2012, 2013 timeframe.
Yep. There's a lot of technology that goes unused, and that is a consistency. So we're gonna pull. I want to make sure we stay a little bit on point here too, which is, if you were to describe to somebody who has never been in the military what a training pipeline is like for a guy who was a regular Army 11 Bravo dude, what does that look like? And like what were hallmarks are very, like, in your time in, very key moments where you're like, I remember when I really mastered this concept. And I'll go first in a sense. If you let me, I remember when I really figured out reload timing. And I'm not talking about the action of taking a magazine and dropping it out and I'm not talking about the action of it, but really figured out the timing of it in the momentum of a gunfight. Because I remember that because I remember the day very well. It's one of those few things that I remember quite well, because like it just was a eureka moment of figuring out battlefield tempo, which is a fancy word that people like to use all the time for whatever reason, but really figuring out when I'm planning and mastering that reload. Because and the way that I was thinking about it is like, I basically you're moving up, you're doing an assaulting on an objective, and I'm setting myself in such a position where I'm counting my rounds and I'm counting their rounds, but I'm not actually counting rounds. You kind of figure out what that feeling is, and then you are topping, you're slamming in a new magazine so that when you come around that barricade, that's when they're thinking about reloading, and all you're doing is getting them to go, your opponent, to being stuck in that position where they have to think about something other than you. And that was just, it was like I'd been in plenty of gunfights before, but it was like that was a day. It took me a while to like I really figured that out. So go ahead.
I think one of my peripheral moments was being a squad leader. So I already had two tours, and we're in, some kind of training environment. I think it's Yakima or NTC, and we're doing a live fire. And it was like being able to bring all the weapon systems you have to bear on a target and how to do it properly to allow the assault element to maneuver, right? That I think was like the big pivotal moment of like, I'm directing heavy weapons platforms, anti-air platforms, machine guns, small arms, and indirect fire from my one position by yelling and using a radio. And to me, I was like, holy shit, if one person does this correctly, controlling all of this elements that he can bear, it was really wild to see. Like, hey, your job is to direct everything up on this mountain, on this objective, break that objective up between your TRPs and stuff like that, and just have constant fire given this much ammunition until these guys can get from point A to point B.
So the only reason why I'm asking you to do these because either between where we're at in the military or just between you and the audience, what's a TRP?
Target reference point. So say it's even we'll just do one building, right? And we see it from one perspective. You can put one corner of the building as A, one point of the corner is B. So your initial fire obviously would be what would see your assault element, which would be A. So we would direct all our fires at A, and then as the assault element gets closer, we would shift to B, i.e. putting rounds still on that reference point, but in a safer manner so that assault element can get as close to the building as possible while we are still engaging that building.
Yeah, your shift fires. Yep. So the reason why I wanted to talk to you about this one particularly was because if you look at how the firearms industry, the teaching world, the gun culture has approached teaching for so long, is it's kind of like, well, rifle 1, pistol 1, rifle 2, pistol 2, and then you get into something else, and like, but we don't really even do that in the military. At least I didn't. Like I took a designated marksman course.
So we taught SDM. You're supposed to go through a level of training, at least in the infantry, and I did a better job of it when I became an instructor and came back to the line of SRM is actually supposed to be a mandatory qualification done every 6 months to where you do the SRM marksmanship, and it's, left face, right face. It's all very basic stuff, but I guess that could be tied into level 1. But we got into that stuff teaching later on, back what we were talking before when we did the vehicle class and had an assault element jump out. We then got into how they plan their TRPs, target reference point, how to clear an objective, how to do phase lines and stuff like that. And I thought that was really cool that I got to share that knowledge with civilians.
Yeah. No, there's another part about it too, is that when I look back, I realize now that I spent a lot more time bounding in a grassy field than I did shooting at things. Like, and don't get me wrong, in my time, Ranger Battalion had a pretty fat ammunition budget. It wasn't small. So we got plenty of time to shoot, but most of the time, I spent more time going dum 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 bang 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 with and running around in the fields and doing all that kind of stuff, quite a bit more than I did. I spent quite a bit more time doing that than I did actually like doing a battalion live fire, a platoon live fire. And so now what I want to be able to do,
we played a lot of laser tag. I would say our units were pretty good about getting all the miles gear out, which sucks, zeroing it, getting it to work, and playing laser tag like on a large scale.
Never touched miles gear. Never saw it.
Oh, you're lucky. You're lucky.
Never saw it. Never touched it.
That noise of like, you're dead. Like,
yeah, nope. Never had to deal with it. So
it is a good teaching method. I would equate to it to like sometimes airsoft battles, stuff like that. But like the ability to increase your combat IQ by having a force on force element.
Yep.
And learning like, okay, I'm going to try this. And then when it doesn't work, the why, and you're like, okay, I learned something that if I would have done that in real life, I would have died. But now I got to learn that lesson. So you're raising your combat IQ to be a little higher based off of preconceived notions of like, hey, when I attacked an enemy element this way, this is what happened. Not saying it would happen that every other time, but we should approach it at a different way than what we did before because our results were not favorable.
Yeah. No, being able to get that feedback, and I think we're going to see that in the civilian world mostly with airsoft right now. Like until
companies do a good job. Milsim West, you know, they do a wonderful job of having like 300 people split between 100 and some odd against 100 and some odd, breaking down into a company size operation.
So then, coming from the position of being a military guy, what is one of the biggest myths that you run around that you encounter that comes from people who have not been in the service? Myths like don't you guys all know how to? Here's a good one. When my grandfather, when I was young, my grandfather was in the military long before I was around. My grandfather fought in World War II in Korea, but there's this guy, I remember him very distinctly. I was talking about this ranger guy he knew who was a ranger in Korea. Now, I don't know if he actually was, but that's exactly, right? And my grandfather says, and he had a way of doing, and this is in his own voice, like he had a way of doing things where he'd come out to shake your hand, and before you knew it, it was broken in two places. And he could, you're like, and I was just like, he'd just break your arm. And I'm like, okay. And I remember him telling that story so many times. And so then it like the way that for him being a military guy, me being a military guy, it's like kind of like, what the hell is he talking about? Then the other thing about it though is that you have this kind of myth in the military. It's like, well, isn't everybody like a jujitsu master and knows how to shoot? Like,
no. I think the biggest one would be everyone in the infantry is stupid.
No, they are so mistaken there.
The by and large one is everyone believes, hey, you joined the infantry, you must be retarded. And maybe that works for me, but the smartest people I've ever met in my life, whether it be on paper or, basic intellect, but like people who've had doctorate degrees, master's degrees that joined to be an infantryman. And, or the kid off the street that is just very street smart. The smartest people I've ever met have been in the infantry. But on the flip side, the dumbest motherfuckers on this earth, like mild Asperger's, like learning disabilities, have also gotten into the infantry. So that's why I kind of like it. Like out of a platoon, you got 43 people and you have so many ends of the spectrum on physical fitness, shooting, hand-to-hand, intellect, organizational skills, like briefing, processing, how to speak. And you have people that are like way high on one end, but then the complete opposite on the other. And I just found the ability to balance all that to be very fun.
You calling it fun makes it sound like it makes you sound sociopathic, to be honest.
Well, I still think being a platoon sergeant is one of the best gigs. It sucks because you're out of the fight, but now you've learned enough to get in trouble. But now you can mold people to a different level that you haven't been able to before, right? When you're in the regular platoon, right, and you're a team leader, you still have every other team leader to compete with, and squad leaders shitting on you, platoon sergeant shitting on you, first sergeant shitting on you. When you get to a squad leader, you compete with only a few squad leaders, and you have the other platoon sergeant shitting on you and first sergeant shitting on you. When you're a platoon sergeant, believe it or not, the platoon sergeants really don't ever compete that much. Like they do on certain aspects, but it's not that much. So all you really got is first sergeant shitting on you, and like, you're used to first sergeant yelling at you every day. So like, what's one more day or what's one more ass chewing? But this time you have the ability to just say, hey, I made a decision. Or you could, you're like, hey, I tried to call you. You didn't pick up. So I let the guys go. And you now can influence more and teach more and try to change it and shape that atmosphere to what you wanted when you first joined.
Yeah, no, I think every team leader who went into Ranger Battalion at my time, when they became a team leader, they were interested in not becoming their team leader for some reason. There was something about their experience of being a private that was like that they wanted to change, and they very distinctly wanted to change. Oh no!
And pick up a stick and come back.
You just went. Are you back?
Yeah. I'm here. Did I disappear for a second?
Your whole screen just went down and then back. You apparently exited the chat and then came back in, but we'll make sure that that's
Smoke
clean.
bomb. Yeah.
Yeah. So that makes a lot of sense though. Like every team being able to influence that level is I wonder if you could communicate that well to the outside world, because the influence that a platoon sergeant has
So
over
I
his
think that's what made the shooting community building. That's how I took it. Is I'm trying to build, say, a platoon, right, of shooters. I'm trying to get all these people to a different level. I now have to worry about the logistics behind it. I need to find people that can be safeties and teach that subject, i.e., the squad leaders. Then I need people that can enforce it and make sure everyone's doing good, i.e., the team leaders. And then all the new people that don't really have too much experience are my, privates and stuff like that.
the 1-for-1 ratio makes a lot of sense, especially the way that you put up there. Team leaders ensure excellence, squad leaders ensure safety. Yeah,
Yep.
that makes a lot of sense.
And it was
So,
easy to break it down that way.
All right. So then, going back to the teaching, these courses that you're putting on, what were some of the things that you learned from doing it, whether it's on
Oh,
a
God.
community level or other ways?
That nobody checks their mags, and they will literally rip green tip or M855 Alpha 1 at your shit until you say something, even though you're witnessing them witness sparks just go everywhere. And you're like, hey, man, you shooting green tip or M855 Alpha 1? They're like, oh, maybe. I don't know. And I'm like, look, you did. And I make it clear in front of everybody in the beginning, if you don't have the correct ammo, you can use mine and just pay me on the back end. But nobody wants to raise their hand. Nobody wants to be like, oh man, I only got green tip, right? Because they're all dudes from the army who just stole all of it. Like, they're like, I got to get rid of this green tip. And I'm like, that's cool. Not on my fucking steel.
So, what steel are you using? Because I've for a long time, this is going to sound anathema to a lot of people, but I've always just used steel, green tip on steel. Never pitting
And
shot it.
that's fine if it's one person and you're only
Ah,
shooting a couple hundred. You got to think I have 60 people and everybody had to bring at least 500 rounds to this class. So do some quick
yes.
math. And I'm doing these classes every month.
Yep. I can see your point. Yep. Because it really does. I just was kind of laughing at it because I think there's a little bit of a myth that goes out a little bit, which is this idea that if you shoot one steel target with one green tip, it's going to dent it and blow it in half. And it's like, no.
It makes pop marks. And then through repetitive use, those pop marks turn into craters. And then the kinetic energy transfers higher. So you'll have a piece of steel that'll slowly start to warp and bend
Yep. For
due
sure.
to repetitive use. And I'll show people targets. I take pictures now of targets when I buy them brand new. And then what 1 year after a class is, what 2 years after a class is. And it actually is pretty crazy to see. And I've hit up companies where I'm like, hey, you said this was good for X amount of rounds and X amount of years. And I'm like, no, it's not. Like, this is what's happening, right? Like, people forget that, like, we go through 2x4s because there's tons of people that fucking miss. And all the steel is at a 10-degree tilt. So some of those rounds are going to impact that wood, which is fine, right? Until wood became fucking super expensive, right?
Yeah. $10 a 2x4.
Yeah. I would say, yeah, the destruction of steel, I did not realize how high that was going to be. So literally, it's like buying a new steel target every few months. I've spent over 15K on steel targets now.
Yep.
And I bring out fancy stuff. Like, I have spinners, I have dueling trees, I have reactive targets for head, chest, and pelvis. So just so they, when we do like a competition style shooting, teaching people how to do comps, enter and exit certain areas, how to plan your shooting. I like them to have fun stuff. I think the spinner has claimed more magazines than anyone else.
Yep.
We had a student go through like 19 mags trying to flip it. Like,
oh yeah, the spinners and your Texas Stars. Those are all a fun combo.
Well, I want to buy a Polish Star, the one that's 3 and 3 and it rotates like. But that's the kind of thing, is I wanted to expose people who necessarily would just stand there and shoot at a piece of steel to like something else, even though they're not maybe competition people. Explaining to them like, look, this is a spinner. You're going to use its kinetic energy to keep it, to get that fulcrum to spin. But this is also your chance to learn timing, cadence, and whether you are a trap shooter or, you're going to hold in one position and shoot. This is the closest I can get to you shooting a moving target. And they're like, oh, okay, cool. And then obviously after like 3 or 4 mags, they get flustered. And, we teach them how to do it. And we're like, look, I will shoot it 1 shot at a time. And look, 9 shots, you can flip it. If you have a bigger gun, 40, 45, it'll be a little easier. But just exposing them to something that they necessarily wouldn't do because they're not going to go to competitions, and spinners are like $500, so they're not going to buy one.
Yeah, the expense of steel targets does add up quickly, and it's
oh my god, it's so fast.
The thing about it though, and this is where I kind of have a bit of a difference in this thought too, is to get a single decent steel target, shoot steel or whoever, right? Maybe a 550 or a 500 AR 500 AR 550 material steel target is actually not that big of an ask. The cost of it is not huge. The thing is,
no, if they know what they're doing, and I try to tell people when I do my level 1 or level 2 classes, I teach them with 1 piece of steel and 1 paper. And they're like, oh my god, I learned so much. And I'm like, look, if you go out, all you need to do is buy 1 piece of steel and one ability to put up a paper target and rotate between, and you learn all these drills with some cones you can buy at Walmart for like soccer practice. And you now can hold yourself to this standard, right? You have your time standards for certain drills, whether it's a BSA drill or something like that. But instead of you now just going out and plinking, you're going out and training. You're not going to the gym just to do some of those, right? You're like, all right, I'm going to hit this, this, and this. Now you have an objective when you come training. It's like, these are the time standards for these drills. If you can meet the time standard, cool. That means you're at the bare minimum. Now, if you want to exceed it, you need to get within these time standards. And they can do all that with 1 piece of steel and 1 paper target.
Yep, a steel target. Where steel targets get expensive is what I'm trying to say on that one is like a steel target is actually not a big cost. It's maintaining a steel capable range for a group of people that gets very expensive very quickly.
Yes, I have bought a very heavy duty grinder to get out these pop marks early and stuff like that. I have a buddy who's a welder, so I just pay him in beer. When people finally crack stuff, I'm like, hey, can you weld it together? And like, we try to maintain those as much as possible. And we'll always put those ones that are on the later end of their life at heavy duty friction points, right? Like, say I bring one of the automatic rifles for them to use. I'll make sure that the shittiest piece of steel is there for the automatic rifle and not like a newer one.
Oh, for sure. So then as you've gone on teaching, or not even just teaching, but putting on these courses as well, what are some of the challenges that you face that you were not expecting, or maybe that you were? What were the things that were hard that made it difficult for you?
I think the easiest answer would be the community. It's the best and the worst part is we'd have people that would sign up for a class and, their Instagram is all about them shooting and all that. But when they were held to a time standard or safety standard, they were not used to it. And they would try to argue with you. And it's like, I got to the point where like we would film people's runs just to turn around and be like, this is your run. You missed this, you missed that, you flagged these people. And, in the beginning, they're like, no, I didn't. And that's why we just started filming them. And we're like, here, watch. And they were so unaware, either due to ignorance, blissfulness. And these are people that some of them were ex-military, that they thought that they could still do what they used to do. But then when challenged or put on the spot, could not perform.
Interesting, because I've become, in many things that we learned how to do while I was in the service, I've become much better at. But I've also been, I'm not in a normal situation.
Yeah, you care, right? Like, you give a shit about
it's my job.
The martial skill. Yes. Right. Like, I've been out for 5 years, right? The majority of dudes in the infantry, sorry for listening to this, but you probably weigh 20, 30, maybe 50 more pounds than when you left, right? Like, the things that made you good at what you did, you stopped doing.
Yeah. So like, things that I know that I would be worse off at. My 5 mile time is not the same. I'm 33 years old. I smoke a tobacco pipe. Okay. That's not helping me. Things that I know that I'm better at. CQB. Of all things, I know I'm better at it because of just then when I was in the military. Now I've done other things past that that involved that skill set. But it's the point I'm saying in my own self is like I know, but there are places that I know that I've lost it, and some of them I don't know are and I'll be really curious, and I'm always excited when I'm in some sort of environment that like shows me where like, hey, you used to be able to do this, but now you
So
can't
the biggest
anymore.
one would be people who used to be a team leader or squad leader or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Their ability to lead a fire team is definitely lost. Like when we did the team leader course for civilians, right? 60 people broken down into 4-man teams and elect one person to be a team leader. The people who were ex-military, I was like, hey, do you want to be a team leader? They're like, yeah, sure. And their inability to control a fire team, control rates of fire, basic stuff, bounding, whether alternate or successive, because we would let them go, hey, here's your 15 minutes of planning. This is what the objective is. Teach your guys right now, who's going to bound, what successive is, what alternate is, control your rates of fire. You tell them what your cues are going to be, whether it's radio, hand and arm signals, flaming rock. And they're like, yeah. I've done this thousands of times. I'm like, cool. And then as soon as we shoot the first round and throw a smoke grenade to initiate and they had to bound, they were too busy being on the gun as opposed to leading the other people with guns to the objective. And we'd film it and we'd show him and they're like, how do you think we did? And he's like, bro, I shot almost all my mags. I'm like, yeah, because instead of stopping and having them shoot and leading them, you were just shooting the whole time.
Yep.
And I was like, you learned as a team leader, right? Like, the whole age old, if you're shooting, you're wrong. Like, we know that was wrong, but you were not leading your team. You were just shooting your gun. And that's what I think in the civilian world, most people get caught up in, as they all want to be shooters. Nobody wants to direct or orchestrate the firefight.
Yeah, that is a microcosm example on the gun culture issue. The microcosm example being everyone's focused on shooting, and there's also I don't want to call it a counterculture, but that sort of weird edginess that people think is an original standpoint. We're like, well, there's more to gun culture than shooting. It's like, yeah, we've kind of been on that page for like 10 years now, 5 years. Like, there's a lot more to it. So
yeah, people try to deep dive into it and like they're like, oh yeah, well, comms, I got secure comms and I do this. I'm like, that's cool. Who the fuck are you talking to?
It's I think it's a good thing. Look, I'll challenge you on that one. The fact that people are actually looking into it is a good thing. It really is.
I think it's a double-edged sword. I think it's the new look at my fucking quad tubes. I really do. It's your, dudes will spend 10 grand on a radio and I'm like, that's dope. How many other people with that 10 grand radio that you can talk to?
Yeah, sure. What's
right?
like where's the con? Where's the con?
Exactly. Like, we all, people are like, oh, you got a bow fang. I'm like, yeah, I got a bow fang because I got 60 other dudes with bow fangs. Yeah, well, people can listen to your stuff. I'm like, absolutely. I don't give a shit. The plan is to just have that as some form of communication. Is it your primary? No. Is it your alternate? Maybe.
Yep. So this is something that we've been kind of edging towards, is that gun culture certainly hates itself. It certainly is an abusive relationship with itself. Our primary modus operandi, our primary mode of engaging with one another is like, oh, well, that's dumb. You wouldn't do that in the real world. And it's like the most classic example is, or the one that I always have a little bit of entertainment with, is like right now for Redacted, all my kit is in multicam black. That's all in multicam black. Why? Because I'm a media guy.
Super sneaky.
Dude, I'm literally making like movies and videos out of this kind of stuff, right? So it's like, it's an aesthetic, it's a look thing. It's not like it's realistic to me in the setup, like where things go and how they fit. But I'm using multicam black because that's not. It's a media thing. We're doing it together. We're participating as a community. Like, I'm not taking that kit seriously. Do
you think that everyone wants you to be serious all the time and that there is never any room for jokes now because then people think you're not being satire?
I think that, ooh, wow. Okay, so doing this.
Oh, hold on. We'll pause it here. I'm going to grab my charger. just
All
because
right,
I
cool.
just looked at it, said I'm at like 5%. A few
I'm gonna
seconds.
I'm gonna mark the timer then. Some elevator music on for finding cable for the recordings.
Yeah.
So what I think is going on here with the there's no room for levity thing is it really there's not a there's not a short answer to your question. There really just isn't a short answer, but the way that I think about it mostly is there are various different people who exhibit this problem. Some of them are incapable of telling the difference between fiction and trying to look like a thing. I think the at the root of it, I'll get to the root of it in a second here. But for sometimes some parts of the community are sort of revealing how much of their identity they put into the stuff. And so, for example, I've used this one before. All of the gatekeeping that I've seen in gun culture came from people who were resentful about not being in the club. And so, let's just say, um, so like the kind of versions of gatekeeping were always from dudes that you very quickly found out really weren't there to begin with. They were just acting. They were just kind of this weird maturing thing. They either grew out of it, which most people, if they are engaged in that in some sense, usually do, or they kind of fade away. The you look at the people who are skilled and capable and are participants in gun culture. The people who are doing the gatekeeping are not those people. They're not.
Yes, I agree with that statement perfectly. It's the people who want it to be about a certain thing that they either have, whether it's a badge, a tab, a hat,
Mhm.
but necessarily don't want to add anything to the culture and just want to either take away from it or be presented for something based off some notoriety they had in a previous life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when it comes back down to like the whole thing of taking things seriously, at the core of it, and what I believe is at the core of it is that like the war in Afghanistan, we don't have a unified mission. We don't have a direction that we're going for. Now, there's a pro side to that and a con side to that, but the pro side of it is that we are a decentralized environment. Gun culture is primarily decentralized. There is no hierarchy. There are certainly haves and have-nots, and there are ins and outs, and there are cliques and groups and communities all over the place. There's that aspect to it, but there's another aspect to it, which is the thing that generally unifies us is an idea, and that idea has been neglected and abandoned for multiple generations. And so the case on it is the boomer generation or the generation that came before us 100% took it for granted because they were willing to invest in something like the NRA, which I don't have any. It's not like it's not to just shit on the NRA. The point on it is it was the mentality of that generation where they could literally say, I've got a 9 to 5. It doesn't matter to me. I've got my Second Amendment. While the people who were working against them were building generations. Oh no, what happened to me this time? I got to decline. People are calling me today for some reason. Um, Weird. Never mind.
No, no, no,
So,
no. Generations.
you had
You
people of
train of thought.
yeah, right. So you had generations of people who took this idea of the Second Amendment for granted, not recognizing that, look, dude, it doesn't matter if your ideological opponents, if you have the Second Amendment, if they don't believe in it. Like it's they didn't pass it down to their children. We didn't instill it in senses of values. We didn't build it as a culture and a community. So what happened then is that people lost the ability to, or they didn't lose the ability, but they're struggling with the internet age where it is, well, what is real? What is reality? What is this real? Is this not real? Is this humor? Is this serious? Is this satire? Is this an inside joke that I'm not a part of? And I get it. Those are all the things that we have to deal with. And it comes out in two really, really easy cases. The first one is the Boogaloo Boys. Now, people who've listened to the show, I've talked about this before, but when the Minneapolis riots kicked off, a couple of people referred to themselves as the Boogaloo Boys came down to Minneapolis to go get their boog on or whatever. I don't, to be clear, like, all they ended up doing was
This is
getting.
a Hawaiian shirt wearing kit stuff.
Yeah, so
Okay.
you remember like the whole like boogaloo joke that was going through
Yeah,
gun
yeah.
culture.
My buddy Mogun sent me a T-shirt that said Boogaloo, and
Yeah.
he asked me to take a picture on the range. And I took a picture on the range, and believe it or not, one of my sponsors, who is a very corporate entity, they're bought by a corporation, uh, saw the shirt and called me to ask, if I was a part of this thing. And I was like, oh my God, like this is a satire shirt he's selling to be funny.
Well, see, that's the thing though, is that the boogaloo was a joke. The whole thing was an inside joke. And the way that it stuck is because it had a correspondence to reality, but it was a joke. And
So
some
this
people,
would be the equivalent of what was the guy with the big nose that would be over like a wall, and it was either Germany or Russia like actually looked into it because people kept spray painting it like whatever his name was here in that little logo. Do you know what I'm talking
oh
about?
yeah, I do know what you're talking about. Yeah.
Again, something that probably started as a funny joke that actually turned into the fact that like either the Kremlin or Germany had to put case officers into looking into this to figure out that it was a joke.
Well, so like the point about it too, and this is me coming from more like in that philosophy side, is that it was looking like what the boogaloo thing was is it was a method of communication for people to talk about concepts and ideas, but it was all framed within this joke. It's like it's not really in Minecraft. It's not this kind of thing. It was so it really like nobody thought that the boogaloo was going to happen. Really, like for seriousness. There might have been exceptions. There certainly ended up being exceptions. But what happened during the 2020 riots of Minneapolis is that some people took the joke seriously and didn't, and they became the joke. They became
Yeah,
it.
it's like the storm Area 51.
Yeah, it's like so they threw on they threw on their Hawaiian shirts and their plate carriers and they went down to Minneapolis to do whatever, and then they all got locked up and went to prison for dude, because I don't know how to say it any other way, but so the other than like you took a joke and you made it real. It wasn't a psyop. You're just stupid. Like, sorry.
Do you think people's inability to process that information and come up with an idea of like, hey, this is supposed to be a funny satire thing? And again, we have people that I wouldn't say, have a higher degree of education, but they're, on the other end of the spectrum and they were like, yeah, like this is what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
We
Yeah.
see those people all the time, the don't tread on me stickers and all this stuff. Like it's something that at one point held a huge part in American culture, and it does stand for something, but 99% of the people that used it for the wrong thing, right? Like I'm a big comic book guy, and growing up, I have all the old school Punisher comics from the 90s,
Mm-hmm.
and I love that character. But then obviously, gun
Chris,
culture has destroyed that logo.
mm-hmm. Yeah, didn't it kind of come out of like Chris Kyle's time frame?
Yeah, it recame because they were spray painting it on their armor when they were in Iraq, and like again, it stood for something, right? But then it gets taken over by a different group of people, and it turns into this meme where if you see the Punisher logo on a truck, you kind of know what that person's going to look like when they step out of it.
Yeah, but we also know what each other looks like. We do. Like we can find each other in a crowd pretty well. As you said earlier,
Yeah,
white
the gray man, like
white dude tattoos. Maybe
yeah,
I'm wearing, like what now it's white dude tattoos, black shirt wearing Vans. You're like, he's one of
yeah.
ours. So
It is funny. Like I try to dress differently. Like I'm a big anime nerd, so I wear like Sailor Moon shirts. But I'm a 230-pound guy that like works out constantly and does jujitsu. Like I'm not blending in shit. Like
well, I think and I think the point on that when it comes back to gun culture is that there is one thing that I think gun culture should do, and this is sort of like if I'm going to do a tut tut dad talk, is you need to recognize that people are they're growing up here, like they're maturing, they got to figure some things out, and when you're dealing with somebody, when you're interacting with each other, like when we're doing community things, sometimes you like I've done this before plenty of times where I meet somebody, we're like, oh, I remember when I was like that. Yeah, he'll don't worry, guy, he'll grow out of it. You can't really force it. He's just sort of in this section. It's literally it's a phase, mom. And
you're 100% correct. But the good thing is to encourage them to try it.
Sure.
Like something we say on the range is there is no absolutes. There is no 100% way to do this. You can try it any way you want, and we'll see what the outcome is. And I allow students to do that. I allow students to try that. I'm like, hey, look, this is the place to fail, right? We're on the range. I want you to fail in a positive manner as long as nobody gets hurt. Try it.
Yeah, that's
something that works for you.
That's something that gun culture has in the past been very bad at, and I do blame a lot of that on the boomers. I do blame a lot of that on kind of like the old guard, which is this unwillingness to try anything different. Now, don't get me wrong. If I've been doing CQB for 15 years and you're going to tell me that we're not going to clear the corners, we're just going to punch in the middle and death blossom, like, you know, you do you, boo. Like it's fine. Like it's a course.
But imagine the first time somebody tried to show somebody diminishing return in a threshold. Imagine what everyone else's looks were. Like I get it. Like the ability to adapt new, or when we come up with new technology, right? Like the biggest change that has happened finally within the last 3 years is like I have finally only had maybe one student show up with irons. Everybody has figured out the red dot is superior.
On a handgun or on a rifle or both?
Well, pistols. Sorry, I've never had a student show up with just irons on a rifle, unless it was like a Kalashnikov variant, and that's just for like familiarization. But the advancements in technology, right? I was very lucky to be in a spot teaching when red dots were gaining popularity, and in the Army, I had the ability to trick my weapon out however I saw fit. So I was teaching with a red dot pistol.
Good.
And my business partner, who was the counter side on the Green Beret side, he was always teaching just irons because he believed like, oh, it'll fail, blah, 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 right? And I'm like, those are all concerns that are valid. But I was like, you guys all run around with red dots and, you know, LPVOs on ARs, right? Because it's superior than your iron sights. Why wouldn't you give yourself the extra advantage with a pistol? And it took that old guard a while to transition to realize you can do more things with a pistol with a red dot than what you used to be able to do, and faster.
It took some time. I think, you know, and it took some time because the red dots are a really good example of something that was new, but it wasn't really new because people were putting red dots on pistols, you know. But it was like it was new, as in it was newly available because of milled slides, and then it went from new to the trendy thing to then the counter
Roland special. Yeah.
Yep, the Roland. Everyone remembers the Roland special days, and then it was like, oh, that's the trendy thing to do, and then it went from that to like the inverse, where it wasn't. There's sort of the backlash, and you almost get this Hegelian thesis, antithesis, synthesis era. But now, for example, I just got in a lead and steel Pandora, which is their little. It's kind of an acro looking thing, and I know that's probably not the kindest way to describe it because it's larger than an acro. It's an enclosed emitter red dot, and so I've been carrying a Delta Point Pro on mine for a while on my my most commonly used handgun for a while, for a couple of years now. Love the red dot, great. But after 2 years of in and out of waistbands and in and out of belts and in and out of dust and dirt and snow, that dot isn't exactly as crisp as it used to be. It's got a little bit of that dusty splatter on it. So
I live in the Pacific Northwest, man. Everything has to be an enclosed emitter. And again, I love Leupold. You know, I do the little speech of like, I carried Leupold overseas. That's why I trust it back home, right? Both sniper rifles I had overseas, we had Leupold optics. I have Leupold optics on my rifles here. But the Delta Point Pro out here in the Pacific Northwest, everything, it rains. It rains constantly. And we train in the rain. And I've watched every emitter you could think of just destroy itself, except for an acro. The acro in the rain is the only thing that's held up. So that's why I got 3 P1s and 2 P2s. Like,
nice. Yeah, that makes sense for that. It really does make sense for the P&W. So this lead and steel Pandora, is got a, I think its viewing window is 30% larger than that of an acro.
Nice.
And so
I'm all about that.
it's big. Like it's definitely got some size to it, and there's no getting away from it. And it's my first enclosed red dot that I've been using for I've had it for a couple of weeks now. And like I still have some time that I want to I'm thinking about, but ultimately I think that's where red dots are going. And I'm not even original in that. Like, don't get me wrong, this is not Forrest Cooper's hot take on the Redacted Culture Cast. It's
Yeah.
that the enclosed emitter red dot is going is like we're only getting better at them.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's the same concept as thinking of it on a rifle, right?
mhm,
The first few red dots that were on rifles, minus the ones that had black backings where you had to keep both eyes open to perceive both,
mhm,
they were open emitters, and they learned, hey, we're carrying this constantly, dirt, grime, all that, so let's make closed emitters. And I think that the cheap cop out with pistols was like, oh, it'll be in a holster, it'll be this. And I think that we finally gotten around to the majority of people who use a pistol in a professional aspect are out in the elements, so they need it to be enclosed.
yeah.
And mark this, I actually see a time coming up soon where we will have powered optics for pistols, i.e., 2, maybe 3 power viewing windows once that technology becomes a little more prevalent.
I could see it. I could
And I'm not
I
talking like a scope. I'm just like a holographic emitter that has some sort of magnification power, whether it even be 2 power,
mhm.
where it has an easy relief of being able to float in free space. I see that coming out pretty soon, actually.
Interesting. I'd have to see it before I thought about it. I really would,
So,
because
all right, well then,
I could imagine like
I put
a
I put
say
a
what?
powered optic on a flux, and then obviously
Mhm.
shot the flux without the brace extended,
Mhm.
and was like, why don't we have this? Like, just make
Mm.
it slightly smaller, right?
So
You know
like
what your window is.
uh, interesting. So like a 2 power. You I think the hard so okay, so let me get this right. Arm extended,
Yep.
you're not playing with eye relief. Arm extended, small magnification on a flux.
Yes.
And it was and you felt it as a valuable improvement.
I definitely saw that this, if you, again, your learning curve will be what? The fact that you need to make sure that the optic is centered, right? You can't, have black shade on one side, black shade or the other, or you're not perception well.
Mhm.
But the same thing was a learning curve when we had red dots. When we first presented with red dots, we saw all this movement that we didn't see when we had 2 focal points.
Yep.
So then we got used to having that wobble and it didn't bother us. I think with minimal training, I think that a powered optic on a pistol will be the future. I really do. Like knock on wood. If I had some kind of engineering degree, I would fucking make one. But for anyone who's listening, and if you have the ability to do that, even just putting some kind of magnification device on a current red dot, but in a smaller package, tape it up, and then punch out with a pistol, it actually is really cool because we train a lot at 50 for pistol.
Mhm.
We believe that the age old 25 and in is very archaic, and with things that have happened in the real world and people engaging people with combat accuracy at 40 meters and 45 meters, we believe, all right, let's just practice at 50 now with all students, learn how to run whatever cadence you need to run at a C-zone steel at 50. Having this powered optic would help people that, i.e., don't have like good sight or good vision, stuff like that. Same reason
I
why we had
this is
powered optics on our rifles.
yeah, this is for me, not for the audience. 50 meters or 50 feet.
Meters.
Okay, so you're having your average students are shooting at 50 meters with a handgun.
Yeah. If you look on my page, we do this drill called the go to hell drill. And it's basically you start at the piece of steel, run to the 50-meter line, turn around, fire 5 shots, run a 25, fire 5 shots, run to 7, fire 5 shots, slide lock, reload, 5 rounds into an index card on a piece of paper. You have to
Mhm.
have 16 out of 20 shots to have a passable grade. And then it's broken down into time frames.
Mhm.
40 seconds is a C, 35 is a B, 30 seconds is an A. And anything under 30 seconds, that's what we're competing right now. I have 2 times of 29 seconds with perfect runs. And then I have a 28-second, but I missed 2. So it wasn't a perfect run, but it was still one that is accountable, right? 16 out of 20 hits being combat accuracy.
Mm-hmm.
But we do that because we truly believe that you should keep pushing it. Because when I was taught pistol and my business partner, Green Beret, taught pistol, 25 was like the max that they shot at.
Yeah. Well, this is another noteworthy thing. Like, and this is where
Well, the mall shooter, that mall shooter shot the guy at 40 meters, right?
Yeah, yep. And I think he had irons on a just yeah, good for him. And this is
And
the
he
thing
scored
too.
hits.
But
You
and
know,
we are though, gun culture is becoming better shooters. We need to remember this.
100%. The days of like, people, hey, you got to put in the work. Yes. But I've seen kids straight out of the gate that can do stuff that most shooters can't. Now, their fundamentals are still trash when we get a distance or we have to move, but they understand the basics due to YouTube and stuff like that or Reddit, and they can go down this rabbit hole of things that they need to focus on. It's not contained to where they don't have like a training regimen to get better, but they can do just enough to be deadly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's a good thing. Like it's instead of looking at it as, well, chaotic, and I don't think anybody really looks at it as a bad thing. It's good to see, and sometimes you get to take moments to be encouraged by things, and I think this is again where I'm
Yeah,
at.
I would suggest everybody take training in anything they do, just so they have, like, again, you want to go work out, that's cool. You can go lift weights. You'll see some results, but if you get a professional trainer, you're going to get more results. If you want to learn martial arts, go to a jiu-jitsu gym, right? Like, I think that hopefully it'll become the norm someday where we have the majority of people going to a range that it's treated like, oh yeah, man, I'm going to go get some beers. Like, oh, that's cool. Like I got, today's Wednesday, I got my range today. And like, that's their Wednesday, is they go to a club of some sort where there's an instructor, and every week they cover different topics, but all topics are building topics to try to get them to a higher level. I could see that becoming the norm maybe when prices go down a little bit, because right now training prices are still pretty high.
Wait, prices on what?
Yeah, just like range fees, right? Like most people, you have to sign up for a range, pay a membership, and then pay whatever the drop-in fee is for the class.
I think you'll see the ranges, specifically the ranges, will have to adjust their business model. I think that's what you're going to see there. Especially indoor ranges. So like the culture of the indoor range is going to have to change first. And you're starting to see it happen with places like Ann Arbor Arms and a few other ones. The range in Austin, Texas is another one, where the average expectancy of the shooter's capability is much higher. We're not, and this is another problem, is that we treat everybody as if they're dumb. And it's like,
I think that's an extension from the military, is the lowest common denominator.
I do too, but the reality of it is you have the ability to make evaluations on people. Now, we make mistakes, but I think that's such a weird assumption that people have. Is like, well, I'm just, for the sake of safety, I'm going to assume everybody's dumb. Cool. You're lazy. Quit. Find a new industry. I don't want you around anymore. You don't have the intellectual integrity to maintain some basic human decency. That's what
I think it is, the don't judge a book by its cover. And I think maybe there should always be like a shoot-in, like some sort of competency level, because we as humans, mostly males, will always put our skill level higher than sometimes it is on certain subjects.
Yeah, no, and I'm talking about a completely different subject. I'm talking about the kind of laziness that people bring to this culture, where they assume that everybody's dumb, so they don't have to think. Right?
The age-old RSO guy, like, we could tell, like, that's his life. He retired somewhere, and now this is what he does.
Yeah,
to get his jollies off.
That's an example of it. Or there are other places where there's also like a younger version of it, which is, I think maybe fitting within our age range, which is this sort of odd assumption that everyone's out to get them and no one wants them to be around. It's just kind of really there's these certain forms of like odd laziness that I see, particularly from the older generation. It's this weird suspicion that everybody's dumb, And then the other one, like, and the perhaps the more millennial age, is that people make the assumption that people care about them, not in a negative way or a positive way, but like it's a big deal. Like,
Yeah,
you know, you
I
know,
see what
like
you're saying.
it's just kind of like that's weird. I should work on that metaphor a little bit more because I
No, but I
wanted,
know what you're going after.
yeah. So I
It
wanted
does
to
make
get,
sense.
but I wanted to nail down one more thing with you before we kind of start wrapping it up, and that is, so you've sunk time and energy into gun culture. You spent time and energy into trying to build a community. I'm assuming you didn't do it alone. You said you've got a
No,
business partner in another way.
I
There's
got a business partner, and there are tons of people. Like, I do want to take a chance to say there are tons of people who donated not only their time, effort, um, monetary value to help build this, and they sought no. Uh, they didn't care if their name was told or that anyone found out that they helped, and
yeah.
that is very hard to find people who are like, no, I know what you're trying to do. The only thing I can offer is this, right? And I'm like, thank you so much. There's a lot of people that did this. There, by no means could I have ever done this by myself, or without a huge group. Like,
Yep.
and those groups come and go. I will say that
Mm-hmm.
there are people that you find out later on. I don't want to use the term bad egg because maybe at that point in life we wanted different things, but there are people who wanted stuff out of the industry, right? They wanted to get freebies and stuff like that. And this was their catalyst into getting their name out there. And that's okay. If that's what you wanted to use as your stepping stone, that's cool. But it should always be about the community first, you second. And it took a good group of people to come together to try to build this and to keep it honest so that it's not one person. And unfortunately, my name was what it came under and what it fell under, but by no means was it mine.
Okay, so do you think that's putting the cart before the horse when you're talking
Yeah.
about do you think the community, so you said something that people need to put the community first before themselves. And
Because
why?
it's a me. Like, people are like, well, what am I getting out of it, right? Like, and that's the only way people view it sometimes, due to how they're raised, this current generation, the past generation, whatever. They don't realize that when you bring groups of people in, you will always learn something, and it doesn't need to be about the topic at hand. That's why when I have these, I have people come in and you say, your name, your profession, and how long you've been shooting. And the reason why about profession is, by the end of the thing, I'm like, hey, look, your car's having trouble. That guy, he's a mechanic,
Okay, yeah,
right?
because you're starting to get you start, yeah. Because the
The
issue is,
idea of building the community is not just about firearms. It's you're building that network to try to get firearms done, but there's so much that goes into it that's not just firearms, that when you meet these other professionals, right? One guy he's like, I build houses and carpentry. So when we did the CQB class, I told him how I wanted the walls and everything, and he's like, oh yeah, cool. He built it in a day,
because I think that's where we're getting at here, is that I think gun culture has become particularly bad at reaching outside of its own the gun space, right? Everybody wants to volunteer time to. I'm not saying everybody wants to volunteer time. That's put a bit of extra exaggeration, but you're not going to have a hard time finding volunteers who are going to help teach or help put out a block of instruction or pass on some useful information. Whether it's ranger, first responder, medical, kind of any of these little things. Like that maybe if gun culture changes its mind a little bit and realizes that's kind of the, not the given, but that's one part. What's missing is the entire rest of the framework. Is
Well, yeah,
that
everybody now wants to teach, right? Like, which is weird. I don't know where this came from, but like, everybody wants to go out there and be the guy that's like, all right, hey, we're doing X, Y, Z. And it's kind of weird that has become the norm, and not like, all right, hey, look, as a community, we're going to bring all our steel targets together, all this, and we want to cover X, Y, Z. Let's try to find some professionals that can teach us that,
yeah,
because
I think
all these dudes say that they want to learn team level and squad level tactics, but it's always just them shooting a course of fire on their own, trying to go as fast as possible. And I'm like, you can set up a sticks lane, right? There's enough people that have gotten out of the Army that know how to set up a basic sticks lanes to bound towards an objective, shooting at paper targets as you go so you can pass them so that you don't get spall. And then the final targets are steel that are farther out that you then need to clear through and pass through the objective and then like call up, that's where you can incorporate your comms to do a lace report or something like that.
Yep.
Like, we had them use comms, hand and arm signals and flaming rocks to show them that everyone at the end was like, yeah, they're like, I didn't realize how bad radios are. I'm like, yeah, you can't hear shit.
I still love the part of this episode right now is that there's a certain people in the audience who are not sure what a flaming rock is, and I'm pretty sure somebody's got this idea of like a trebuchet being used as the symbol for shift fire. You're just like, it's literally
it means ceasefire.
It's literally a flaming
we're
rock.
going to leave it at that. We're not going to tell them. You can Google flaming rock. You'll figure it out.
Yeah, well, it's probably you're probably going to get in this neck of the woods. You're probably going to get a grill. So
yeah, but it's just stuff like that it's like, you guys want to be this tight knit community and get all the gear and guns and night vision and shoot, and it's like, okay, but what's your objective? Like, and if it is defense or collapse of society, whatever, right? Whatever make believe you come up with, that's cool as long as you have a training objective, work towards it. But there's only a handful of people that I know that they come and shoot team stuff with me, and then I have a group of people that have night vision that they are like, hey, we want to walk this trail, and then at the end you have targets set up for us and we have to bound while wearing night vision and shoot, and then we get to a point where we can't use lasers and like we can only use passive now, and like I set all this stuff up because they want to keep getting better because they don't know what they're going to encounter, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's a good point too, and it's a good position to. I think that's where we're at. Like, this is where I get to be optimistic, is I think that gun culture is really at the cusp of where that's going to become normal. Groups like Orion Training Group, or some of the earlier groups that really pushed like civilian CQB, they got to get credit for it. And no one, whether or not it's a personal thing or otherwise, but they deserve some credit for being a part of that.
I hate how everybody jumps into CQB.
I have no issue with it because it's been the primary thing for so long.
No. I don't mean like as in like they're a new shooter and they're like, I'm gonna go do CQB. I mean that like people think that, yeah, and you'll be great to counter this, is you've been to so many classes and like people think that they're good at CQB because it has been reduced when they go through these training courses to the most basic buildings and setups with no furniture, maybe some opposition, and that's the easiest it will ever be. And folks don't know that unless you've actually wore armor, offset from an objective, and walked in, and then had to clear fucking buildings all day.
Yeah, you will be exhausted. Give it 30 minutes.
I try to tell people I think I had a good perspective because I got to clear buildings when I was 19 years old with a PVS 14 and an M4 in Iraq, and I had no fucking clue what I was doing. Fast forward, 2015, I graduate the Special Forces Advanced Urban Combat. And I'm like, oh my God, I now know a little bit more about CQB than I wish I fucking knew back then. And they just don't realize how pain in the ass it really is, and how to take blueprints of a building, break it down to who's doing what, hot walls, black side, white side. Like, they just know how to enter a corner fed or a center fed room and shoot targets according to their position. And they think they know CQB. That's, I guess, my big thing.
Yeah, I did an episode a long time ago now on the Dunning-Kruger effect in CQB, where you get people, and the reason why we talk about this is because I would imagine you've been some point seen some of this in the world, where you see a guy who has zero skill and zero confidence. As he's gaining skill, he's gaining confidence, but eventually he hits a plateau. And it's this plateau of dogma, where like we always do it this way, we never do it this way. And I hear this every once in a while, where people say like, I'll never do high ready. It's like, cool, you'll always be average. You will literally always be average, because your ability to comprehend environments outside of your normal environment is stunted by, well, low ready is always faster. Like, I understand it. You will always be average. Just gonna put you there, because
Yeah, that comes into what we said before, is like there is no 100% way of doing something. And you need to be okay with accepting new ideas and putting it into practice and see what works.
Yep. And so you take it and what you do, and where people get off that plateau is that their confidence goes down for a little while, but their skill level continues to improve as they start looking at principles and rules as different things. Rules can be broken, principles cannot. But the dogmatic level sees them as the same thing. And so once you're off that ledge and then you start separating between principles and rules, you recognize that a deliberate clear turns into a hard clear really quickly, and you can switch between the two. And what you're missing, and the reason why you're uncomfortable doing one or the other, is because you don't trust your men. And because you don't trust your men, you're treating them like, well, we're just going to strongwall everything, and now you've created a problem that is now another generation's issue. So,
and that's what I mean by people jumping into CQB is like, you know, is there a one-man CQB? Yes. But the majority of these people, they're not going to be in a position to do that kind of stuff. And I don't want to, I'm not saying it's a waste, because, you know, clearing your own house if something happens, like, I'm just saying people like the age-old meme where it shows the guy like stepping over 17 steps, and it's like fundamentals, shooting, you know, learning debate. Everyone just steps to that CQB thing, and they take one class and they think that they have a comprehension of it. And I wish more people would realize, like anything in this world, you have to practice it constantly. You have to seek out information of people that have done it more than you.
So do you think that it's our fault though? Like we're the guys, we're the people who are supposed to be the SMEs on the subject. Like we're the veterans, we're the guys who did it, right?
Yeah.
Is that our fault? I mean, there's because there's two sides to this coin. On the other hand, dude, you know, on the other hand is try to advertise a course on.
So we know that there's instructors that will not teach CQB due to the fact that they think that there is some sort of SOP or knowledge that has not been put in a book that is publicly available. And I will tell you, everything is publicly available, even things that most people don't realize is publicly available. So all that information is out there.
I know, and I'm not using names because I don't actually have any names to give on the subject, but I have met people in that position, and it's quite literally because their command is a not a JTAC. Their command is some sort of JAG wannabe who's like, I saw you teach somebody how to do a barrel knob. You're done. We're kicking you out of the unit. And it's like, so that's
again, I posted videos of like setting off breacher charges and dudes flowing in, and I got people sending me emails that were like, you shouldn't show that, you know, this is SOP. I'm like, bro, everything is on the internet, and it's literally just a charge going off and us flowing through. Like, chill out. And I think that goes into, you know, we use this bro vet culture, but like people think that you need to join the service or get a tab or get a special hat to learn certain things. And I wanted to get rid of that, as I think everyone should learn how to do everything. I just think that you should dictate your training to your levels and start going from there, right? Like I use a big example of like weightlifting or jujitsu. You don't just skip to some super advanced move because you don't understand how to get there, right?
Yeah.
There's a reason why they don't teach you heel hooks and stuff like that as a white belt, because you'll fucking snap everyone's heel the wrong way, right? Or when you go to the gym, you're not putting on 4 plates on the bench press, right? Like, but in gun culture, everybody thinks because, you know, I can put a round on a target at X distance and X time that they know what they're doing.
Well, then how would you solve that problem though? How would you solve that?
That's why we've always gone. I think force on force is a great equalizer, right? Again, it's not perfect.
Which is now illegal because you can't buy UTMs anymore because the ATF banned training ammunition.
And I do believe, you know, not a conspiracy nut there, but there's something there. Again, you know, you can use airsoft guns or whatever, but like I truly believe that you need to do some sort of force on force, and that is learned from jiu-jitsu, because you're not as good as you think you are when things are coming back at you. And you're not as ingrained as you are or you think you are until you have things coming back at you. And I've been very lucky that with local law enforcement, I'm still on a short list that when they do force on force, I get to be the bad guy. and we have
Very good.
escalations where, you know, the cops are supposed to win evolution 1, evolution 2, I'm allowed to kind of stir it up a little bit. And then by evolution 3, they're like, hey, fuck them up. And that's where I get to use tactics and stuff like that, poke under cars, shoot them in the feet. Like, you get to actually be like, hey, look, if you went against somebody that's slightly trained, you guys are going to get fucked up.
Yeah, that goes back to your example of CQB is that the idea of hot walls are a terrifying experience, especially in
Yeah.
American construction. Like
And that's what people don't look at, or people don't even understand that concept. When I'm like, we take a student, you know, and we do rifle 1, pistol 1, and then I come to this house and I'm like, all right, look, with what you use for self-defense, these are where your rounds are going to go. Like, what's in that room? And he's like, oh, my kid sleeps there. I'm like, okay. So
yeah, I mean, and for clarity's sake, for those who are listening, a hot wall is any wall where you will potentially have allied or friendlies on the other side of it. That's not known to be able to stop your projectile. So
yeah, and people think that they can just shoot through everything, and it's like what you talked about before, like a lot of dudes doing this peeking and door frames, and I'm like, dude, I've shot rounds through a door frame just to see what it did, and it's hilarious. It goes straight through. Like,
I am not digging those people. I'm saying that's a very easy training scar. You know where it came from. It came from airsoft and paintball. It came from ammunition rounds where you could do that in a shoot house. Like, so I think it's just a training scar. It's not like they're a bad human being. It just means you don't know what you're doing. Like, okay, that's a point of learning right there. You're using a door frame as if it is a point of cover. It's just concealment. It doesn't stop the bullets. And
so having a force on force, and then having somebody that overall is the arcing, like, you know, let's go into D&D terms, right? You have your dungeon master, where he's like, all right, look, you guys did force on force, you hid this way, but he shot rounds in this wall, which would have killed you. You know, like, being able to do something like that, I think, would be beneficial. But that takes people who want to learn and are okay stepping back and being like, hey, look, you know, I want to test my metal as close to the real thing as I can.
Yeah, and if an instructor is doing a CQB course and you have the ability to do it, if you get a guy who's chicken heading around just call him dead, man. I think
Ruben Paradox Training does a wonderful job of like the new thing is entanglement shooting, right?
Okay.
And it's great for cops because cops find themselves in a hand-to-hand scenario all the time, to then where they need to draw their pistol, right? So how do you draw your pistol and shoot when you have somebody, you know, folding you into a pretzel? And a lot of people will say XYZ, but it's like, hey, go try that. Go put on a blower suit and have somebody grab you in your holster and then go. Like, and to me, it's amazing to watch because there is a science behind it. But you need to practice it constantly and have the confidence and ability of moving your body and somebody else's to do it.
Yes, you have to. It's not something that it's like anything else of that sort. Any sort of martial art, you have to.
Yeah, you're not going to figure it out when the time happens. It'll be too late by then.
Yeah, it's also, that's not the end goal that we want, though. Like, we don't want the end goal. This is, you want people to be funny about it. Like, as a philosopher too, you could make an accusation that I'm dealing with ivory tower problems and especially things like rules of engagement. But no, the things that you understand to be right and true and good are the things that inform you. And what we're looking for is what is a better way of identifying, fulfilling, and accomplishing training in a good way. I think sometimes training loses its way because it doesn't know what it's aiming at. There's an idea out there that we're pursuing, and that's sometimes where we're at as a culture, but we just haven't quite identified it yet. And for us,
and there's these interesting effects that happen. Like, one I always try to show people is, I was like, hey, when you have your group of friends and you have a steel target out, go out there, like, walk out and just start shooting 1 or 2 rounds at that steel target, and watch how many of your friends just get online with you and start shooting at that steel target for no reason. And it's like, I've tried to ask people, like, hey, why did you go start shooting that steel target with your friend? Like, no drills, you just started mag dumping. He's like, oh, I don't know, he was doing it. And it gets into this thing of like, well, I just do it because he did it, because he did it, and so on and so forth. And I think that we need to change the culture of wanting to do drills, wanting to challenge ourselves, being okay with like, hey, you're not going to be the fastest guy that day. You know, having like
Yeah.
a shot clock should be the most important thing on the range, right? Like,
I get your point, but I'll tell you it's a supply and demand issue. There's not a lot of drills out there. I mean, there are kind of a lot of variations, but they're all variations of the same thing.
like that's where I everything you've said has been amazing. This will be the one thing I disagree on is we would come up with scramblers every day, and every
There
day
you
they'd be
go.
different. And the idea is like you can just set steel in these weird positions and then just go set cones in weird positions. And it's like, okay,
Mhm.
you clear it from left to right. And then as soon as everyone gets their time, it's like, okay, now we're going to clear right to left. Now everyone gets a time. And the limit is amazing, right? You can change up steels, have small steel here, big steel here, the spinner here. You can set up any of these courses just like IDPA, IPSC, that kind of style, and just challenge each other. And that's what I think comes from the culture of lifting weights or jujitsu is you have to challenge yourself if you want to get better. Yes, there is a maintaining phase, and I think
Mhm.
that we're pretty good at that in the gun culture. Is like, most people now know what their build drill time is, right, or their El Presidente drill
What's your
because it's
bill?
been
Yep. It's like your bench press and your deadlift. What's your bill drill and your El Presidente? Yep.
exactly because it has become so norm. But most people don't know how to, program themselves for a 9-week cycle of lifting heavy to increase strength, right? It's the
Mhm.
same concept with shooting as nobody knows how to build a class or a progression of shooting to achieve something better. They do believe that the majority of it is bought. Like, hey, this is my pistol. I'm going to buy an STI because I want faster split times.
Do you have you heard of was it defensive mindset training out of Minnesota? He's a friend of mine. I used to work with him a long time ago. His name is Bo Dobozinski, and he runs an online thing called defensive mindset training, and that's exactly what he does. Is just it is long form, almost like in that dojo sense where you keep coming back to it, you keep coming back to it,
Yep.
and he's been doing that for a while. He's run into a different problem of um, one of the one of the challenges that we all face is very simply marketing. Is as how do you get it in front of people when you don't have all the same assets? And I mean, quite simply, you can do social media, you can do social media as well, but at some point in time you realize that the algorithm is going to choose softcore porn over your stuff being shown.
every time,
and
every time.
and and so like not even people, just the algorithm will choose that for you, and so there is an issue there. But
I,
for
I
him,
I think on that aspect, it's you just got to keep doing it, and I think word of mouth will always outbeat social media in the long run. Like, yeah, somebody can have a huge social media presence and the algorithm can pick it up and show it. But if you have a friend that you know and he goes, hey, man, I took this dude's class, you need to take it,
yeah.
that that will outweigh, paying for ads or stuff like that. And like, to go on your buddy's point, like we use a sports science instructor who worked with me in the Army and now works over at Group, but I still currently have him on the employment roster, is because we want to treat it like a professional athlete. We want to
Yep.
treat you as a shooter like a professional athlete. And I think that I hope gun culture gets there quicker than normal. Is I have noticed a big culture where people are starting to like lift weights and run more in the community.
Oh yeah.
Not so much like I wish more people would get into martial arts as well, just so they understand their body mechanics and stuff.
I
And
think
that you might have to fight somebody before you get to shoot somebody. Like,
yeah, this is where I think we'll come back to agreements on this one. Is I think it's we're moving in the right direction, but man, does it take a long time. It's slow crawl. And the reality of it too, and this is what I think is affecting most people in the gun culture right now, money and time. Right? You have like that we are being forced to pick between.
I think it's management of money.
Yeah.
Not to beat the dead horse analogy, people are like, yeah, I'm going to build my fifth anodized part AR.
Yeah, but
And it's like,
those people are never going to train anyway. Those aren't. I'll jump straight to the end. The people who are doing that are not in our camp. I mean, they might be gun culture people, but we're
I have seen certain people that we've brought over. Like, all right, I'll give you this analogy or simile. So in the Pacific Northwest, we had things that are getting banned every year. So their excuse is like, oh, well, I want to buy that before it's banned. That's what I'm saving my money, right? Like, because we just banned assault rifles. I'm going to use that quote so we don't have to dig into that. But so they're like, well, I want to buy this AK or I want to buy this MP5 before they ban it. And I'm like, okay, well, that went all your money for training this year. They're like, well, next year, right? And then, well, next year they're going to ban mags, so it's like, okay, well, I'm going to put all this money into mags. And I think they, the industry, not this industry, but the higher up people, the government, has got us in this, we need to purchase the things before they're gone. So we're not spending that money on the things we probably should. Does that make sense?
I get it. So you think that they're using scarcity, forced scarcity as an an attack vector for economic warfare.
Perfect. You summed it up perfectly. All right.
Okay. Yeah. So
I see that constantly in students, right? Like I have a lot of students that have a lot of money, but the ones that only do like 1 or 2 classes a year, I'm like, hey, it's coming up on normally when you do a class, they're like, oh, well, I want to buy this gun before it gets banned. And that has been the last 3 years, because every year for the last 3 years, Washington has banned something very prolific.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Magazines over 10 rounds and a semi-automatic rifle or pistol that has above, X amount.
Mm-hmm.
And I see that happening. I see that going into a lot of different other states. Is like, they're like, well, I'm saving up to buy this because I think it's going to get banned soon, or it is getting banned soon.
Yeah, no, I see that happening. I'm familiar with the scarcity attitude. I know when, like, let's use a recent example would be looking at your ammunition supply and going, oh, well, I don't have enough, and then Israel kicks off, and then 2024 is around the corner, and there's a reason why people are buying ammunition.
Yep, because that's where I think the dry firing became, everyone started on this dry fire kick, is because, well, yeah, ammo became hard, but it's like, look, you need to set aside some of the other stuff you did then to afford ammo, right? Like, you don't need your fucking white chocolate mocha every Monday. You can put that money back to buy ammo. Like, what is your priorities, I guess? And I think people put firearm stuff as a back burner, like a lot.
They do. Well, they and to some extent, I think sometimes that's not the wrong answer, right? Why do we do the things that we do? I don't train so I can fight people. I train so that I'm capable of defending my family. So the family is a predicate example, going back to Karl von Clausewitz and his idea that war is war being an extension of a political system. He said you have to have a state before you have war, and this is this idea. And so this is a bit of a war of definitions in that phrase. But on the other hand, and there's another coin to this, there's another part to this argument that I kind of want to close off on, is I also don't think it's reasonable to think that every single person that can be a jiu-jitsu guy and a gym guy and a gun guy and be on the same team or same par on all 3 of those. Like and I think, and even as being an industry character, like I think we are putting an unhealthy expectation on ourselves, thinking that we're going to be able to train jujitsu up to the level of being a blue belt or a purple belt or whatever. Not everyone has to be a black belt, but okay. And train shooting so everyone's at least maybe an A-class USPSA shooter, and have a decent supply and night vision. And it's like, dude, I'm just saying this as a man. That's a lot of money and time.
No, it is. And well, we've gotten to the point now where we have parts of the culture where they only invest so much in one, where like, we have kids that still live at home that are 24, but they got, dual night vision and suppressed Mark 18s and like, Meridian Defense AKs, but they're not even making a car payment, That's the one thing I will agree that, as a culture, I think we could definitely use with some financial advice, which you're 100% correct. It's, hey, what do you need, right? And I think everyone should have a concealed carry pistol to defend themselves, and then, some sort of home defense weapon, i.e. something that has a larger caliber, the ability to, fire more rounds, than your standard magazine of a handgun. And, you know, do I think everyone needs night vision? No. Will it increase your capabilities? Absolutely. Do you think people have gotten caught up in the race of increasing their capabilities more than their skill level? Is that what's happening then?
Yeah.
Because people are like, well, yeah, I got night vision, I got thermals, I got this, I got that. But it's like, okay, that's cool. You have it, but are you trained on it?
So to answer your question, yes, gun culture is pursuing stuff over skills, but and in their defense, that is an easy, tangible objective that I can solve. I can tell you whether or not I have a pair of DT NVGs in my house. I can't tell you what I can't do everything else. Like, one is an abstract object, one is a very physical object. Now where
I
we
get
are
it.
at is where we are at as a community is where I'm observing gun culture at right now is it is looking at that abstract, it is looking at that physical object and going, what for? And then they're trying to fill in the abstract. So this is me, I'm trying to be, I'm not trying to be, in the defense of the culture. What else do you expect? It's easier to look the part than to be the part. It's everyone wants to look like an army ranger until it's time to do army ranger shit. Everyone
Yep,
wants
I
to be
get
able to, right? And so like, but also like, this is very classic. Yes. So now we're solving it in inches and degrees, and it's just like what we were talking about at the very beginning. In 2013, I had a Smith & Wesson MMP9. Now I've got a SIG P320 XL, whatever.
Yeah. So
It's a
we should get to where we normalize in the culture showing drills, but showing failures of drills, right?
yes, yes.
Yeah,
I
like
think,
nobody, right? Social media is always you post the best version of everything, right? Like I
of course,
unfortunately know too many people in the gun community that will show you a run, but it was the 23rd run they did, and that's the first time they got it right and hit all the targets, right? We
sure,
should
but they
normalize
they
doing
still did it.
drills. Yeah,
They still did it. Okay, like that is not where they still did it. Like, good for you. We know that it's not your first one. I know when I see somebody post a drill online, I'm not assuming that it's his first time ever doing it. I'm like, oh yeah, good, he did it. Like, that's awesome. I
until
can
they
figure it out.
hashtag cold start.
I'm sorry, it's social media, dude.
Yeah.
It's a black multicam plate carrier. It's not a it's not a first start hard cold press whatever. It's until like I'm standing next to you and I see it. And that doesn't mean, but I'm not also making moral evaluations on your human capabilities on the basis of your Instagram shot timer speed. It's more like I see that and I go, "Oh, that's cool. I like the way they filmed it. I like the way they did that. You know what? I should go out and shoot that drill." I haven't
But I
done
think
a
that's what the culture's turned into now. Is just it's people with cameras that shoot cameras more than they shoot their guns. Like it has become the taking a picture of their guns in front of all their other guns and not necessarily shooting. And though like what you say about the algorithm, right? Like the soft porn, I would equate that to the soft porn is people are more interested in pictures of guns than people shooting them.
because it's yes, and in their defense, it's
And
easier
it's
to
because
do.
it's easy.
Yeah, well, and also every time I pull the shutter on my camera, it doesn't cost me 20 cents or 25 cents or 38 cents. So like, and
Yeah.
I get it too. Like, and I get it too. For me to go to the range now is infinitely easier than it was for me 6 months ago, or I'm sorry, 2 years ago. Now, if I want to go shoot at 2 o'clock in the morning, it's 30 minutes away. Throw my stuff in the
Nice.
back of the Jeep and I go out into public land, and I can do that. And could you do that east of the Mississippi? No. Good luck on that one, buddy. But there are differences here, and some of those things are. I think gun culture has one of the reasons why it hates itself is you've got a group of people here and you've got a group of people here, and in order to solve it, you got to take those two and you got to put them together. But until those two groups of people are naturally congealing with one another, there's gonna be an issue, and that is not to and what that looks like in our community and our culture is you got people who want to train and people who know how to do some of the training, and right now the people who want to train want it for free and they don't want to pay it, they don't want to pay their dues, and the guys who want to do the training and have the skills don't know how, have not yet quite figured out the next way to bring it to everybody else. So that relationship needs to move towards symbiotic, And it does so, the way that it will accomplish it is when these two different groups of people have a common goal and they can see it, and then they can all start aiming at it. And that's why we're doing this, and that's why you and I are having these conversations.
Well, I think the common goal would have to be probably a common enemy.
Let's hope not. Let's. I mean,
As bad as it sounds, I think that's the only time you can get, you know, the olive and vinegar to mix is when somebody tries to eat it, right? Like,
that's a good point. That is a really good point. You're not
hey,
Italian,
I
right?
really do. Like, the gun culture is the only culture where, like, if we do the workout stuff or the jujitsu stuff, like, working out, it's like, okay, show me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lift it, or you don't. Jiu-jitsu, hand to hand, like, all right, we can sit down and figure out if you know how to do it or not.
Mm-hmm.
But the gun thing is always there's always the what if, right? Unless we bring back fucking dueling, like.
Yeah, I think to some extent, I think for a lot of people, they don't know where they own up on that field, and that's just unfortunate. But also, it's very fortunate because we're not all dead. There's
Yeah,
a
and no, don't get me wrong. I am very thankful that we've both been to other countries where they could have learned a lot from being able to privately own guns in mass quantities like we do.
Mhm.
And it probably would have went a different way for them as human beings in that culture.
and
And we
it's
both sit in rooms surrounded by guns, and we have the privilege to do that.
Yeah, let's see. The M110 is not behind me right now.
Yeah.
But the point on that is, so not the point on that, but I think in closing on this one up, as we're wrapping it up, is and I thought about this unfortunately after Thanksgiving, so I couldn't season the family pot any better. But it's something like this: for all of gun culture, for as heavily armed and capable as gun culture is, we do not settle our grievances with each other using violence. And that that's a piece of evidence, is that if you look at American culture, America right now, and you look at the people who are in gun culture, they have an AR-15 with a suppressor, or they know they're not like, I just picked up my first whatever, right? We do not solve, like, gun culture does not solve its grievances with one another using all of our capabilities of violence, and that's a good thing. And it's
Yeah, I
funny.
mean, it is good that we don't have individuals like, theoretically, right? Like in Minecraft, I could take my, suppressed sniper rifle and go set up on that guy's range that I don't like and wait for him to walk out. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. We don't do that, though. This is the point. Like, this is in our favor. People who do that usually don't know what they're doing and are usually really bad at it, and I'm okay with that. So
Yeah,
I think
that
that.
you do bring up a good point. And like we've had instances on ranges where people have showed up that were not wanted, and it's really weird. The first thing that both parties did was take off their war belts and set
Yeah,
them down, so
yeah,
that when they got closer to conversate, there was not an access to a pistol or a bladed weapon. And it
yeah.
was actually really cool to see. And I didn't think about it till you just said that. Is I've had a conversation with somebody on a range, and they had one with me. And the first thing we did was we took our war belts off to meet face to face to try to solve that issue.
Yeah.
And it
This
was
is
a common knowledge of like, hey, look, I don't like you, you don't like me, and we're gonna have to come to an agreement on something. But to do this, we both know that it would be in each other's favor to disarm first, right? Like,
Mhm.
like an old knight thing, like, all right, I'm fucking taking the sword off, like,
Mhm.
where they meet for the parlay and nobody brings weapons, like.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's something that I was thinking about over the weekend that turned out to be very much so a thing I'm thankful for. Is that, like, really, as much as the world that we live in seems kind of absurd now, with you being up in the Pacific Northwest, having to listen to, the kind of people who are bringing in instituting these rules and laws, and they have consequences. They do. Imagine, like think about it this way too. It's as simple as this: you run a gun store, and that's what you pay for your family's food with. And now the state just banned AR-15s because of an
It
assault
is
weapon. You know what I mean?
It is
So
wild. I live literally 45 minutes from a city that, open drug use is legal.
yeah, I mean it's
Majority of petty crimes cannot be prosecuted. So every building, like everything is behind a glass case that, they have to key and lock to open it to get it to you. And like
yeah,
I live far enough away. Go ahead.
at the hardware store here, everything is behind lock and key. If it's
And
small
and
enough that you can put it in your pocket, it's behind a it's like, really?
and people ask why I live so far away, and I live out here because the grocery store here is not like that.
Yeah.
Everybody's nice, everybody's friendly. You still get the old crazy hillbillies with a 1911 and a leather holster. And I like living that far out here that's okay.
Yeah, is it
When 2020 happened, nobody in this town wore masks.
no,
Like
no, that's fine.
nobody cared. And I like that. And I wish that things would go back to that as a whole.
We just do it by ourselves. I think this is the part that no one likes to hear. Well, maybe people do, but it's beyond the point. Is we're moving towards decentralization. To the empire, decentralization looks like collapse. And yes, America is falling apart. And for some people, that's like their stability, their capability, their position in the world is going away. And it's because you're a useless bureaucrat that has no value add to the community. To everybody else in this world, they're like, good, I don't want to be a part of that anymore. I don't like, we're not interested in the useless bureaucrats anymore. And so what there's like that to the empire, decentralization looks like collapse. And we're starting to see communities pop up that are not like becoming isolated so much, but I'm paying attention to the things that I have influence over. I'm not paying attention to things that I can't change.
No, and
So,
also learning new things.
mhm.
Like tomorrow I go to the butcher.
Nice.
I found a lady that sells cows. And I was
Mhm.
like, okay, how much to purchase a cow? Found out that price, found another person that wanted to split it with me, purchased said cow. Now we're going to the butcher and I'm gonna learn how to cut it into what you can cut it into and
Mhm.
how far that really goes. And
Yeah.
to me, that's something that like I wish I would have learned, I'm a 34-year-old male. I wish I would have learned that sooner. But now I am, I understand now, like this individual has to raise X amount of cows and sell them at this price to afford XYZ.
Mhm.
And the butcher has to charge this to afford XYZ.
Yep.
And this is, going back to that smaller community of like, all right, I know what the butcher does now, and I know what the lady who grows, grass-fed cows and pigs has to sell and all that. Like, and I like that I see a lot of people getting into like little homesteading with chickens and stuff like that. It's
It's
cool to see.
yeah.
Is it sustainable? Who knows? But it's
Well,
cool that we were starting to think outside.
yeah, it's not the first time. My in-laws had a hobby, moved out of the city a long time ago, started a hobby farm, raised their own chickens and cows and everything like that. And they have acreage and a little bit. And they're very much so like a proto what gun culture calls today homesteading is what they did 50 years ago, 40 years ago.
Yeah,
And so
and and, and
it's nice to
it's
see.
funny. Yeah, it's coming in a loop. Like, by no means do I want to raise my own cows and cut them. I just wanted to learn that aspect. And like
Mhm.
something I challenge people who are listening to this is, go volunteer at your local police department, fire department, and learn what they really do. Like I just did a fire department 24-hour shift where I learned where all the tools are on the rigs. They let me drive the rig. They let me sit in the back, learn how to counter steer. You get to see what they deal with on a 24/7 basis, the people they have to interact with, what kind of things are happening in your local community, i.e. crime for the police department, health concerns for the fire department, and getting a sense of like where you actually live and where you stand in that community. It's actually something I think more people should do.
Well, that's a good one then. Maybe I'll have to follow you up with that because we moved about a year ago and I'm still getting to know the neighborhood. So,
Yeah, me and Sky Pirate, he was like, "Hey man, I saw you did a volunteer shift at the firefighter." He's like, "I didn't know. Are you like a volunteer?" I'm like, "Oh fuck no." I was like, "My buddy's a lieutenant there, and whatever realm you live in, I think you should learn your health concerns around your immediate community. But also, if you believe in this collapsed society thing, I'm like, do you know where all the tools are on a rig? I do, and I know
mhm.
what tools are. what they need to hook up, what compression tests they need, like, and that's like, the best tools you could possibly come up with. Like, I know how to operate a fire ladder, right? Like, and I'm not a fireman.
Oh look, the guy who was a gun nerd in the military learned how to turn the water gun into a super soaker. Of course you did. It sounds
Exactly. Like,
right
I
right up your alley. Love it.
yeah, I truly believe in learning how to use, like, I think what started this whole adventure is like playing video games and like survival horror games, where you had to learn how to use certain tools to do something. And I was like, man, maybe I should learn how to do that in real life.
Yeah. Maybe the cure to male loneliness is picking up new skills. That's hilarious.
God forbid, yeah, we turn into a collector of some sort, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Lord forbid a man do anything. Well, Brent, let's close up. Read off your socials one more time so people can find you, and we're going to carry on.
It's Brent.bb.beyond is my personal one, and then 11 Bravo LLC is my business one. I can't thank you enough for having me on, being able to talk objectively on things and being able to talk about the community as a whole and what we can do to try to make it better. Because if you're not coming up with a solution to the problem, you shouldn't be talking out loud about the problem.
Yeah, we're working through it one phase at a time, and this is it's a good time to be alive. I really think it is. As much as it's like, I would love to be exploring the stars or exploring the oceans. Really, the time that we live right now is it's kind of like a Lord of the Rings quote. You don't really get to choose the battles that you have to face, but you do have to face them.
So, I do like your analogy of, I was born too late to discover this world and born too early to discover the universe.
Yeah, so it's just I've felt that part to my soul, and then realized, well, I've got something that I have to do today. So, well, Brent, again, thank you for participating with the Redacted Culture Cast. Our goal here is really to continue on, and someday we'll get you on the show again when the time lines up. Would love to do that, because the goal here is the goal for the Redacted Culture Cast, and what we are aiming at is equipping people with the intellectual tools for the things that we face in this world. Essentially, engaging with the life of the mind in regards to violence. How do we think about violence? How do we think about culture? How do we think about these decisions? And so that's why I wanted to have you on, and I'm really glad we got to talk through a number of subjects having to do with military experiences, some of the odd exclusivities that happened there, but then also I think your story of how you guys started putting on these classes and inviting these people, that's really quite inspirational, and I hope to see that replicated across the country quite a bit more. So we're going to close out here. For those who want to support the show, you can head over to redactedculture.locals.com. That's going to be the back end side. That's where we build everything, and that's what keeps the lights on and keeps the thing funding. You notice one of my lights keeps going out, so you can tell where we're at there. The other one is we've got some momentum, and if you want to follow us on Redacted LLC on the website, that'd be redactedllc.com, and then on YouTube. I'm sorry, what's the last one? Follow us on YouTube, support us on Instagram. We're almost to 10,000 on Instagram, so we're just consistently working, putting out good material, and we'd love to get you guys along. So, Brent, it's been a great time, and hey, we'll talk to you soon. So go forth and conquer.
I think the girls with their nails done now.